Just a couple of documents in that Dropbox thing.
I mocked up a recommendation.
Can tell it's a lot because my computer's like, do you sure you want to open all of that? That's a lot of files. Okay. So we are live streaming. Zoom is up. It is 7:01. So I will call to order this August monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Trustee Cannon is possibly going to join us via Zoom from points elsewhere. Any changes to the agenda? A very lengthy agenda. Okay, no changes to the agenda. Item number 3 is our consent agenda, which includes our abstract of claims. We have 2 abstracts. One is looks like an add-on to the end of last fiscal year. Just waiting for the Dropbox to load it for me. Unless you have a hard copy printed. Let's see who I'm connected to here.
While it's loading, I'll mention briefly, there is a youth commission charge in there. I believe it's 20 something, so it's a small one. But that comes from our yearly reconciliation with the town. And I hoped that Mary would be here, but I just wanted to quickly say thank you to Michelle Rake, who basically did all of the reconciliation this year. So thanks, Michelle. I don't know if this message will carry back to her, but
Thanks, Michelle.
that's recorded, I suppose, at least. So.
Okay. Okay, so we have an abstract from the end of last fiscal year. It's a general fund abstract with some miscellaneous charges of various type and kind totaling $20,071.08. A water fund abstract totaling $7,424.68. And a trust and agency abstract totaling $2,107.60. We also have an abstract from abstract number 3 of the current fiscal year, general fund abstract totaling $255,892.45. The EMS billing abstract totaling $37,022.78. A water fund abstract totaling $122,102.75. Sewer fund abstract totaling $17,768.38. And a trust and agency abstract totaling $28,989.17. We also have minutes from our July 10th board meeting. And so if someone would like to, I would entertain a motion to accept and adopt the consent agenda as presented. So the motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions, conversation, or discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Let's see if we can see what we can do with that. Item number 4 on the agenda is our first public comment period. You'll notice in the agenda, due to its length, we do not have a second public comment period scheduled for the end of the meeting. So if any members of the public in person or on Zoom have anything that you would like to say, please do. Somebody always has to go first.
Yeah, no problem. Let's go first. I see on the agenda, there's information about sidewalk grant. And I assume that's for Main Street, but I know there are a lot of people in the village that are concerned about the next concerned, looking forward to the next sidewalk project that's done by, the Alan Vogel's group. And one suggestion was Pennsylvania Avenue, which seems to be quite a lengthy one. So I would just wonder if anything is being thought of about sidewalks on Pennsylvania Avenue. And the other thing that I spoke to the police about this, we have a problem on South Street with somebody going very, very, very fast down the road. And he said that they have ticketed and spoken to the young man. And but apparently there's somebody over on the other side of town that's doing the same thing. And it starts as soon as we know, everybody knows when the police go off duty. And it starts then, and they just go roaring around town in various places. And I think it's particularly in my neighborhood, there's a lot of children in the neighborhood, a lot of pets, old people like me walking with a cane, not on a sidewalk, etc. So I hope that that problem can be solved really soon. That's all.
You know what Dusty's looking at for a volunteer sidewalk this year?
So this year, the big push was up the hill to the conservatory. There's now some more funds with the new budget year. But I think Dusty might be looking for more of a fall to next spring type of thing. I know a lot of the conversation is centered around repairing or replacing existing sidewalk before we look at actually adding new stretches of road. There's been a lot of concern around Main Street and the kind of deterioration of some of the Main Street initial build and how that's kind of getting heaved in different places. So I don't think we have a final decision on where the next kind of project is, but I know we're keeping an eye on all the different options. We do have a study from a ways back of where we might kind of focus our efforts, but for expansion. But I think a lot of it is going to be trying to repair existing pieces first. That said, we do have the conversation on grant funding for a stretch up Main Street that we'll talk about later, but that's kind of opportunistic when we can find grant funding for larger projects.
Has Elm from Juniper Manor to downtown ever been discussed? That just that stretch where older people, I see so
Yes.
many having to walk in the road because that slate sidewalk there is.
Yeah, Dusty and I have mentioned that, and partially in due to snow removal. I think
Mhm.
there's some thought that there's some amount of snow removal that I don't know. We're unclear on where snow removal is kind of required to be done, but
Right.
so it's come up in that regard. But that's an interesting one to consider because it's not terribly long. It's kind of flat, and there's some existing slate there that might make connecting it make more sense. So we haven't really kind of doubled back on where to focus efforts
Mhm.
for the next build.
I just kind of walk that one pretty frequently and see a lot of elderly people having to walk in the road with their canes and their walkers and their small dogs. And I can see where it could be kind of just because we do have that elderly traffic there.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I will put back on my list to start pondering with Dusty and maybe with Ben too, because we've been talking about this in the past of where another section might be valuable. I have been talking to the DPW about the potential of removing slate sidewalk as kind of a service that could be provided. I don't want to get them overwhelmed and overloaded with requests for that, but it is something that I think helps improve safety in some ways, because that slate gets real dangerous, even though it's lovely. And, I hate to kind of break things up in certain places, but when we think of kind of a liability sort of situation, that does get scary to me. Well, we wouldn't be looking to replace it until we had more of a plan of
Right.
where to go. But if people are particularly concerned about that, or if people want to look at making their own doing their own sidewalk build there, we have had someone reach out to the village and ask about that, and looking at where the DPW can help. It could be in removing the sidewalk, and then someone else could do the build on top of that.
Okay.
Talking about the sidewalks makes me think of another similar sort of issue that the village is really I don't know, if I feel like never really dealt with, and that is the trees, all the old trees. We're really, we have a lot of trees that are in bad shape, a lot of damaged trees, a lot of dead trees. And I know in the olden days, there used to be like a tree committee and you would get $50 to replant a new tree, but it costs a lot more than $50 to take down the old trees. My neighbor across the street, I believe the grand total was close to $10,000 to take down 7 trees, and they are in the right of way. And I don't know, it seems like there should be some sort of support from the village with that kind of expense to a homeowner. You know, for talking about safety in the neighborhood, there's one that I will not walk my dog near because it is definitely going to come down. So I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to have a conversation. Just, I think that's something that we should be thinking of. The water, again, it's, you know, it's always the water is something that there's not a fix for the water. It's continually affecting homeowners. I know even Keith has said that he gets a lake in his backyard. So another thing that I would like to see maybe more conversation about. And then just the strategic planning and the rezoning. I know that you're going to talk about the data and the recommendations, and I can't believe I'm the only neighbor here tonight, but I just want to reiterate that I think we need to be thoughtful and go slow and be strategic. And I know that my neighbors also feel that way. I know Jerry's out there virtually, not sure where everybody else is, but so had to stand up for the team, I guess, and just say it one more time. So thanks for listening.
I'll just mention, you'll notice under old business, there's a comprehensive stormwater management plan proposal. It's something we have been working on for about 3 years. So that is something that is being addressed and is being looked at. Much of the work has to be done on private property, which means we cannot spend village money on it. We're constitutionally prohibited from spending taxpayer dollars on private property. But developing a proposal that will at least tell us what can be done within the village's means of ability to spend is very important. Where can we upsize culverts? Where can drainage be improved in the right of way? That kind of thing. So that's something we've been working with MRB on for a couple of years now. And it's on the agenda tonight. I don't know if you want to talk about trees, because that's also something we've done a lot of work with over the last couple of years.
I don't want to belabor the point just because we have a fairly long agenda, but I will note that we do have a tree program. For 4, maybe 5 years now, we've done an inventory of all of the trees in the village, and we've encouraged homeowners to take them down if they were dangerous and in the right of way. Generally, this year we have switched to taking less of a proactive stance and doing that inventory and asking homeowners to reach out to us if they have a tree that they would like support taking down. So our model has been to supply some level of financial assistance in order to encourage individual owners to take care of their trees, because we have a right of way, obviously, but the village doesn't own those trees. And we want to reemphasize continuously that the liability and the risk posed by those trees is something that we're concerned about, but is something that homeowners take on themselves when you own a piece of property. That said, if there is one that you're scared of, reach out to me, let me know where it is. Even better would be talk to the person who owns it and have them reach out to me. This is, yeah, I'll be interested to know where it is, because I think we've taken most of the worst ones out. So I don't know, maybe we're sort of a step down, but yeah, I would love to take a look.
Any additional public comment? Going once. Okay, with that, I will move on to item number 5, which is reports from representatives. And I see Ann Corman from Tompkins County Legislature is with us. So Ann, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Rorden. Let's see, a few things tonight, not too many. One of the big things Tompkins County, our recycling and materials management department's working on is a 10-year plan, and it's going to be even more advanced than their last one, is trying to create more of a circular economy, which goes along with what the state is working on also. So it's pretty aggressive. So one of the things that the goals is to reduce the amount of tonnage that goes to the landfill by half. I would like to see it be reduced even more. And some of the ideas that we have are for construction debris. For instance, when someone's building a house, there's a lot of construction debris things that, they can't use. So I know a lot of people here have probably seen those kind of dumpsters where there's a lot of things that could be reused. There's smaller pieces of lumber or extra pieces. And then also when buildings are being torn down. So we'd like to figure out how to reuse as much as that as we can. And in Ithaca, there'll probably be, like say, for instance, bigger reuse center, maybe one just focusing on construction debris or I'm sorry, construction materials. And eventually, probably what's going to be really helpful is reaching out to the municipalities and seeing if there's some way to have hubs throughout the county so that if someone's building something here or taking something down, you have extra materials, you could go somewhere locally in the town or village, drop those materials off, and the same thing is pick up some other materials. So stay tuned for that. And I hope that's something that's of interest to you at your municipal level. We accepted a GIVE grant, and you probably heard about this. This is gun involved violence elimination grant. And that's to help, especially with the more, I'll say, problematic areas, higher incidents of violence, especially gun violence, mostly having to do with the city of Ithaca. So we're going to be working with the probation sheriffs and then Ithaca City Police. One of the things that they found is going to, well, the research shows that helps is some cameras, which we've been reluctant to have too many cameras because we don't want people to think we're spying on them or they're misused. But the technology now of people having, there's a trail of who can access, the material. You have to be authorized to look at the footage. And also with the technology now, for instance, if there's a gun-involved violent crime, we can capture that, someone's license plate, for instance, and then we'll know if they're across, say, the other side of Ithaca or just still on the street, for instance. And one of the things the camera is also going to do is it can hear and differentiate a shot from a gun. So it will alert officials right away, EMS and also the police. So to get people there faster, and that should save at least 5 minutes, because I was surprised to hear that there's on average a 5-minute delay between when a gun is fired and when somebody actually calls 911. So that will help with that response. I wanted to thank the Village of Trumansburg for streaming your meetings and being one of the first to really having something that's during COVID to really make sure that, and before, to make sure people can participate as much as possible. And you might have seen the study that was out by a Cornell student that across New York State during COVID, the rates were, 80 to 90% of municipalities that were streaming. And now after COVID, or as COVID's subsiding anyway, it's down to 30% of municipalities across the state that are still streaming. And Tompkins County is at 85%. And so the village, where you can watch the meetings later, participate virtually, is really a help to people. I know it's a help to me too. So thank you for doing that. We are working on the county's strategic plan. That's our helping with our 5-year plan. And so we're looking for feedback. You might have gotten notified as municipal officials to participate. We're also asking everybody in the community to participate. You can go to the Tompkins County website, and there's 2 ways you can participate. You can take a survey, and tell us about what you like we're doing, what we could improve on, new things we could do, or you just have an idea and there's an idea page where you can go, here, I just have 2 seconds. I just think the county should do this. So please let me know if you have any trouble accessing that. Tomorrow, well, I'll end on something good. So second to last thing is not good. Unfortunately, the opioid overdose deaths are way up for the first half of the year. Let's see. There's already been 17 drug-related deaths for the first half of the year. And in 2022, there was a total of 28. So our stats are not looking good for this year. And they've increased every year, almost every year since 2018 that we've been collecting the data. So we've issued a health alert to folks in the community. And the last thing, tomorrow at the Emergency Services Building up on 72 Brown Road, we're having electric vehicle and hybrid vehicle showcase, 3 o'clock to 4:30. If anybody wants to come on up and see what the county's doing to increase our energy efficient vehicles. And that's all I have right now.
Any questions for Ann? And just out of curiosity, did that Cornell study have any data on how many municipalities in New York State were streaming prior to the pandemic?
I don't believe it did, but I'll send you a link to the article.
Okay, no, that'd be great. And then just on another curiosity question, the technology that's available that the county is going to be able to access for the cameras and kind of locational gunshot tracking, is that going to require the city of Ithaca to approve their use or deployment within city limits?
Yeah, we're working with them on that. Yeah, it's not, so maybe I wasn't clear. So we're working with IPD. I from what I remember is they weren't in a position to accept the grant for certain reasons. So the county stepped in to make sure that we were able to get this money to help the city.
Right. No, that part I understand. I'm just curious, you mentioned the concern that residents will occasionally voice about too many cameras in too many locations, whether common council is going to have to approve the locations for these cameras, and whether, how those conversations might be going.
That's a good question. We have, I think, later this week, I think I have a public safety meeting, so I'll check on that.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions from here? All right. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone from the town board tonight, so we'll move on to reports from this board and the front office, starting with myself. The only things I'll mention are that we will be returning to 2 meetings a month in September. Possibly a month late after seeing this agenda, but we will be returning to our previously scheduled 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month at 7 p.m. for board meetings. And then the only other thing I want to say is several of the items on this agenda come out of a lot of effort by our clerk treasurer and deputy clerk treasurer in the front office over the last several months. They represent my never decreasing laundry list of things that I like to throw at them. So I just want to thank you both before we get to the conversation. Thank you both for all the effort on some of these things, some of which I think are overdue and are fairly significant moves into the 21st century, I think, on the part of the village. So thank you both for all of your work on that. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Marcia for fire and TACC.
Okay, for fire, there were 37 calls, 3 structure fires. We've had 6 altogether this year so far for structure fires. It was a pretty laid back meeting, just regular maintenance, hose and ladder testing. I do need to, there is a gear purchase that you'll find in the Dropbox. I think we approved that. Did we approve?
So you mentioned something in April, but I'm not sure if it's the same here.
Okay,
So I can verify
You'll-
that, make sure I get the right budget line, but you can still get. that.
okay, so you'll find in the Dropbox that there is a fire equipment. There's a fire equipment quote, and I think it's for 12,000 something, 12,000. Yes. And that was, I talked to Matt about that and he said that's just for gear. And then you will find an updated one from Jerome Fire Equipment Company for $15,024. And he said that's for everything that they need. So I would need a permissive referendum. I think we approved back, we talked about it in April. I don't think we approved the purchase for just the gear. So I don't know if I need a permissive referendum for the entire amount, 15,024.
What did we approve previously?
You approved gear, so that you made out of the equipment and stuff. I'm just gonna put my hands on that.
For a total of how much?
For a total of around 8,000.
Yeah, and this is for 15,024.
So it's coming out of straight budget lines, not this.
All of this is?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Right, so if it's not coming out of a reserve, we just need approval for the quote. Whichever one we're taking.
Okay,
If it is coming out of reserve, then we'll want to probably combine the two. So we're going, we need the $15,000 one.
the $15,000 one that will get everything that they need.
And does that include what was previously approved?
Yes,
Or is this in addition to?
no, that includes what was previously approved. What was previously approved was the, here,
Sorry, you said this was in April that we talked about this last?
Yeah, it's in the minutes, but I don't see any documents in the Dropbox.
Hmm.
Getting specific here, and it's that,
Okay.
where did it go?
and I'm trying to verify. Matt.
So if we have the total list, I think you could just make a motion, say up to 15, and then list each piece of gear.
Yeah, the original one was for 4 pants and coats and 1 and 2 sets of boots were $12,106. And then the additional quote was for heat hoods for Viking particulate hoods and gloves for the firefighters.
Right, but I don't think. I'm asking what was approved in April or May?
You said it was only 8,000?
Yeah, so I don't know, there was never a document.
I guess there was never,
Dropbox for changes. So I'm not sure if this is a new request or an update. But Marcia would have that.
So this is a new request,
Mhm.
then are we able to still split it between those two budget lines?
That's- Yes, we're doing it. For this year, if that's what the chief was saying. And we don't have to. Thank you for.
Yeah, well, I sent him a text just before I came here and he just said that was just for everything we needed.
How did I see this year?
How long is this quote good for? 15 days, huh? So what we really need is an itemization of the spend from April. And this spend, which lines they're coming from. Whether this is a new quote or it. Absorbs the first one, the first approval. Because then we would only be approving a new smaller amount. We would be approving the difference.
Right.
If these are unrelated, then we need to make sure that the 15024. That there's enough in those two budget lines to split it.
Right.
Otherwise, we're gonna need to do
Right.
referendums, pull it from reserves.
Yeah, we were supposed to meet last Thursday and something came up and we couldn't meet for me to get a clarification on the budget.
So I'm thinking that just looking at, I mean, I'm guessing, but based on what this equipment, based on what this is, it doesn't seem like it should be time sensitive.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
So I would suggest that we get an itemization of that last spend versus this spend and which lines he wants to take them from and then what ratio, and then confirm with Jessica that the money exists in those two lines to cover it, which it should, but
Mm-hmm.
want to confirm that. And then we can, with the detail, we can take it up in September.
Okay. One thing I am confident of.
All right,
We do need a permissive referendum to buy tires.
okay,
We got two quotes. We got one from Caskey's for $6,975 and we got one from Parmiter's Incorporated, and that was for $5,068.34. He said the tire quality and everything was equal, so I say we go with the $5,068.31. Cut off my.
okay.
It's record that we decided, there was the chief needs and inspect from vehicle repairs,
Right,
not.
Not
not the reserve,
because we don't need a permissive referendum.
right.
So then, Marcia, you making that motion to spend this money on the tires?
Yes, I am. I would like to make the motion to spend the money on the tires.
Second.
Motion and a second to spend $5,068.32 from the vehicle repair line on new tires for which we know which truck this is for. It's
Um,
not on the quote.
I don't know, because I didn't do it.
hang on, I think he told me.
I'm a little confused, sorry, where you got that number, because of the Cassie garage invoice in the Dropbox is $6,975.
This is the other one.
Parmenter
Did you get
tire.
did you get the updated one?
So we have a motion and a second to spend some money on some tires. Any conversation, questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anything else on fire, Marsh?
No.
Anything on TACC?
The only thing I do want to say was to replace the tires on 1804. So that's the truck that it's going on. And he said the annual gear purchase will come out of the gear line in the budget. That's what his email says.
Okay.
What's in that gear line, Jess?
Yeah, here is.
I might have my budget sheet too.
while she's looking, I didn't get to the last, get together after hours that was at Atlas.
Hmm.
So I really have nothing to report on. I feel bad, but I work a 10-hour day, and by the time I get done at like 5:45, and it's from 4 to 7, I just can't.
Yeah,
15,000
Not looking.
documents for the year budget one. We're trying.
well, then in that case, I guess we can spend that money. Okay, then I would entertain a motion to spend or to approve the Jerome Fire Equipment quote for $15,024 on turnout gear for the fire department. Someone like to move that?
Yes, I would like to move that, please.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up, EMS Youth and Street Tree Advisory, speaking of trees.
So nothing really to mention on trees that I didn't just mention. Nothing terribly interesting on youth aside from sort of carrying down the same path that we've been on for feels like forever now. As far as EMS goes, one thing I wanted to mention is that Joel has been working on building up quotes and just general research on it. I guess in pursuit of the idea of an alternate choice for billing company. For some years, there's been some doubt about medics. I'm sure you've all heard this before. But they continue to do the job well enough. There's some room for improvement. So Joel is pursuing that. No real clear results at this point, but just a heads up that will be coming next month. But it's, nothing in any case. As far as EMS calls go, there are 59. Total 5 covert, 5 Hector, 3 Interlake, and 3 in the city of Ithaca, 2 in the town of Ithaca, 5 in Mecklenburg, 1 in Newfield, 1 in Ovid, 12 in the village, and 17 in the town. I think I'll just leave it there. We'll call that good for tonight since we have got a list together.
Okay, any questions for Ben? That Newfield call was a difficult one. I can look it up. DPW water sewer CPZR farmers market.
All right, let's see, we'll start with farmers market, not much to report there. We'll jump to DPW water sewer. So in the Dropbox, there is a permissive referendum, which I actually just tweaked the wording of just a little bit. I don't think it changes it much, but I think at least it makes it more clear for me. This is for up to 60,000 for a new pickup truck and snowplow from the DPW vehicle reserve, as well as up to 24,000 from the water equipment reserve for a water pickup. Subject to permissive referendum. So I will.
Before you move that, these have to be 2 different referendums.
I was
They
wondering if they might. So I will split that out then. So first one I will do for the DPW vehicle reserve for up to 60,000 for the purchase of a pickup truck and a snowplow. This is subject to permissive referendum. Yes, thank you.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any questions or conversation?
This is just our planned for vehicle replacement cycle. I've gone back and forth quite a bit with Dusty on making sure we're keeping on top of price increases and so forth. So we'll be continuing to update and revise the replacement schedule as we go.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, and all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
And then, yeah, so the other one is 20 up to permissive, up to 24,000 from the water equipment reserve for the purchase of a pickup truck, also subject to permissive referendum. I can say more after I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So this is the difference between trading in the existing water pickup, which they got a relatively good deal on, and the new pickup that is ready to be picked up as soon as we do this. And then after this, I'll actually want to mark the old water truck of no further use. So that'll be the next motion after this.
Okay, questions on this permissive referendum for the purchase of a new truck for the water department? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
And then following on top of that, to then trade in said old water truck, I'd like to make a motion that we declare the 2017 F-250 water truck of no further use.
a motion. Do we have a second? Do
Second.
you want to put an effective date on that?
Effective immediately. There. Or do we
Theoretically.
have to drive it to there?
Legally. We can't get the new truck for 30 days. We have to wait for the permission referendum to be up. before-
Yes.
Right.
Did Dusty talk to you about timing at all on that? He said he might about. I'm gonna take that as a no, which is fine. Time.
Moved and adopted, I posted tomorrow.
It's technically 30 days from
Right,
the adoption of the resolution. Regardless of its posting.
right. No, fair. He was,
So the only things we discussed we're ready to have it covered as soon as they're ready to actually train for me for real purchase, so.
so yeah, so I think my understanding is they have the current truck. I think Dusty was trying to get clever with like picking it up and having them bill us, but then we would pay it. Once they would, require a payment within 30 days and we could kind of do that with the permissive referendum, but that gave me concern that that's why he was gonna talk to you, and I didn't know if that had happened, but I agree.
Theoretically, you could do that if the dealership is willing to wait 30 days for payment on the balance.
Right. My question was how quickly we can pay them. Can we like have it ready to pay on that 30th day kind of a thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They cannot be in positive possession of the check until the 30th.
Right.
Which if they say no way,
Right.
then we want to keep the old truck available.
So by the way, maybe make the decommission effective 30 days from today.
Except if they are willing to take it, sooner,
Right.
they can't take it.
Right.
What is that? They can't get their fund, they don't even care.
They cannot own a village vehicle until it's declared of no further use.
No, I know, if they're not gonna get their fund for 30 days anyway. They can the truck before then.
Right.
Can we authorize a battery you to finalize?
We can also hold on this particular piece and see if Dusty gets back to me.
Why don't we say we're declaring the 2017 of no further use effective. Effective the date of delivery of the new truck,
I like that.
just in case they want it sooner.
Let's do that.
Okay, so that's a friendly amendment, then you're accepting to the original resolution.
Yes, so it is now of no further use on the date of the receipt of the new truck or delivery of the new truck.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right. One second. Both of the truck items. Great. Yes, we have an agenda too, which would be good if I looked at. Yeah, so the fire flow testing is, I don't think we actually need a resolution, but I want to run it by the board. We've been asked, the DPW or the water, I guess, water department has been asked to do a fire flow testing at a couple different times and places. We don't currently have a cost associated with that. I don't think either for the water itself or for the time of people to kind of go and supervise and be on site. So Dusty suggested we put a charge of $100 for time plus the bulk cost of water for whatever gets pushed through the fire hydrant during the flow test. Yeah, I don't know if we need a resolution for that, but just wanted to bring it up here.
When do we do those? And where?
The one that I keep hearing is out of cars because they're looking for pressure testing and whatnot, but I think there are other, I think they've done some up at Compass too for fire.
Yeah, we definitely have, but I'm surprised that there's others.
I think it might just be that it's been those two in kind of short succession, that there's just a thought of like, hey, we show up for an hour or two, we should make this something.
Why are they showing up? Like, do they need to be there?
It was my impression from Dusty that he wants someone to be there to be paying attention, being available. I don't know. I don't remember the details there.
Oversight.
Could be, yeah. Gotta watch the guy watching the guy doing the work. All right, I will.
I don't know if they should be charging for water, however, it's,
All right, yeah,
especially if it's being thrown onto the ground.
right. All right, I can throw that on there. Let's see. I'm gonna add one thing. I'm gonna skip that part. Last part is just to say that the New York State DOT in the year 2027 will be repaving Main Street. Put it on your calendars. It's going to be a party. But they have already started putting out notice that that's eventually happening. Design is looking like it will happen in more like next year, 2024 into 25. But we are talking with them early and often to try and get our desires and hopes included in that conversation. In reviewing the comp plan and what the comp plan calls out, I'm primarily asking them to consider striping parking and crosswalks on Main Street. That's been brought up a couple of different times for a couple of different reasons. Striping parking and keeping it away from intersections gives people better sight visibility. That's a thing we hear about a lot. Striping parking gives more regular parking spots and can get a little more density of parking, make the best use of the space on Main Street. And we have handicap parking in the lots, but not anything specifically designated on Main Street. And that would be a nice place to add additional handicap parking spots as the state kind of decides they might need. But if anyone has any other thoughts or hopes or dreams, they're not rebuilding all of Main Street or cutting into sidewalk or anything. It'll be a repaving effort. So the scope kind of will need to fit with that. But the striping seemed plausible as a thing to start hounding them out. But if there's any other thoughts or concerns that people have had, I think, mention, Keith, that, hey, by the way, maybe there's a crosswalk up by Not My Dad's. No, so we have asked and they've done a study and they've told us no, thank you. But I'm bringing it up again to say, hey, what about this time? So we'll see if that goes anywhere.
And to backtrack to farmer's market issue, I've had a lot of people approach me about people parking on Hector Street. In front of there, and the bank also has, or not the bank, but the post office also has an issue with farmers market people parking in there because they are supposed to be accessible 24/7. If people need to get in there and get to their boxes and the parking is taken up, that's a problem. But they are saying the people that are coming down Hector and trying to turn up onto 96 by the firehouse, they said the visibility is horrible. People are walking from that exit that overflow parking area there, and it's very hard to see when people park along there
Yeah,
to the other way. I don't know if they maybe could have a volunteer there for those few hours just to make with one of those little stop sign things or
Yeah.
something to make sure that people cross safely, because I know I've been down there too a couple of times and had families like just bolt right in front of me. So I don't know. They were just concerned, especially about that parking on Hector,
Yeah.
right along the road there.
yeah. Well, as far as the 96 parking, I mean, we can that would be another entry crosswalk, try and get people to park a little bit distance from that intersection to give people some site visibility. As far as signage or anyone working that's on us, basically. That would be another part-time police officer if we wanted to. So we could have that conversation as a board, but I don't think that's not really in the market's budget to
Yeah,
be working on that. But
probably one of those. But did anybody die yet? Yeah.
The DOT wouldn't have any say. over
Right, no,
cost-
no,
cost.
but I was just kind of backtracking on the
Right,
whole farm.
right, sure. Back onto the farmer's market. I mean, that would be on us, right? So like the farmer's market isn't part of the village entity. So if we want to push that, we would have to fund it and find someone to drive it, just like we have the police work the school. I think it would be on us to find a part-time person for that.
Would we have to pay someone or could we find a volunteer?
Can't have a volunteer with this department. Under any circumstances.
Oh, would it have to be?
Has to be a police department.
It has to be police
To control
department.
traffic.
Yeah, especially on.
Man, there are just
state
so
highway.
many loopholes out there that you just have to.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the word is just be careful.
Just be careful. And, that's another intersection I can kind of continue to point at, that it gets dicey when everyone's parked right up to the corner.
Right.
There's nothing striped and there's no visibility there. So that really is the consistent issue with every driveway that comes out of, Main
Onto Main Street,
every
yep.
intersection that's on Main Street, so on and so forth. So.
Is there to that Main Street with residents coming out of their drives that have been before this board, is there a possibility to have a light string and takes away parking with this changing project?
I mean, I think so. Honestly, the state gets to decide. I think they own the whole Main Street, so it's kind of up to us to maybe propose something possibly. And I think there might be more conversations as we get into the actual details of design. At this point, I'm just kind of generally placing the idea of let's talk about striping and parking and intersections and visibility, and hope that then becomes part of the details that we get into a little bit later.
So 2 items to keep put on that list for either proposal now or discussion at design stage is, in addition to striping and handicap spots, are loading zones. We should have at least 1, possibly 2. The delivery truck that's blocking the northbound lane of 96 right across the street once or twice a week is an issue. It could be a PD enforcement issue, but if there was a designated loading zone, that would at least help. Because then if the truck isn't using the loading zone and it's open, then it's on them. If someone's parked in the loading zone and they shouldn't be, then there's still some process there. And then the other thing is, if they are willing to consider some minor-ish design changes, that curve across from the old Napa and in front of Garrett's, which was intentionally pushed out into the road in 2006, has not done what it was intended to do. If we move that back towards Creekside and Garrett's a little bit, basically blunt that curve slightly, you would actually pick up parking spaces there. And I know TCAT wants to get rid of one of the parking spaces on the Napa side for visibility issues at that crosswalk. So there might be a compromise in there where if we pick up 2 or 3 spots on one side, we can afford to lose a parking spot on the other and get everything striped. Improve visibility and traffic flow at that at that curve.
Yeah, the loading zone is interesting because we've talked about assigning that, and I think we may or may not be able to do that, but I think yeah. So we don't, I thought we had some signs somewhere.
15-minute.
We've got some 15-minute parking, right, for,
It's a loading zone.
No. I'll bring that in too. Yeah, there's a fine line between what we can kind of put signs up for and what they're really supposed to kind of have control over, so.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I'm taking all these notes because I
Okay.
will absolutely forget all of them in 12 months when they come back around, but this is all good. Let's see, what did I do? All those pieces and these things. All right, I'm gonna keep it there and we can keep moving on.
Okay. Keith. Police and village ETC.
So, I'll mention, I think the ETC stuff real quick. There's a meeting tomorrow to discuss planter boxes, amongst other things. Fortunately, I won't be able to be there, but I know the group's getting together. Just had some early preliminary discussions. Jessica for helping with all this, preliminary discussions on some winter stuff, Winterfest stuff. I believe Jen Demers is going to oversee graphic content again. Anything else that the board should know? Jessica, that's myself.
There's some more details on the design, for the execution of the design of the already approved pollinator garden. So that we can begin, and we'll connect with the DPW commissioner and Dusty, just so they can plan that in for their work. We do have a deadline to have some things started and completed by December, which is fine. But we wanted to try to give DPW some heads up, so that's coming. But no drastic change, not building a park, just executing the already board approved, publicly broadcasted planting of pollinator berms. But there will actually, sorry, we do intend, Keith, to, and maybe you can remember which meetings, we had targeted 2 meetings where we would specifically ask people if they wanted to comment on how they might like to see all of our green spaces, and in particular, the one by the water tower used. And I think I'll have to refer to my notes, but we were looking at maybe the second meeting in September and a meeting in October, just as one of the avenues to begin the conversation, not the only avenue.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I want to thank Jen Demarest, who put a lot of work on this, and of course Jessica. I know Jen had a pretty extensive meeting at the end of June with the DPW crew, all going all around that space, and just really giving an understanding of what's going on there and what we'll have to what we have to work around and understand about that space. Okay, I'll jump to police now. First, the monthly report, we had 171 calls for service in July. And of the criminal investigations, we had a fraud, 3 trespasses, 5 domestic investigations, 2 harassment, and 2 motor vehicle crash investigations. In terms of, sounds like everything went pretty well with grassroots, nothing major in terms of anything that happened during that weekend. Had a couple EMS ambulance calls, 5 disputes / disorderly conducts, but no arrests were made in those. There's 1 harassment, 42 traffic and parking complaints, and 1 domestic dispute. But she felt pretty good about the 4 days there, or the whole week, I guess. Lastly, kind of the big piece of business is she would like to get permission to lease 2 new vehicles, 1 replacing the chief's vehicle that went to EMS, and 1 to replace the Ford Explorer that's already out of commission. I believe there's apologize if the pronunciation's incorrect, but Denoyer quote in the Dropbox for these 2 vehicles. So it would be a 5-year lease for both. And the idea is that we would own these vehicles at the end of the lease. Doing the 5-year lease should save us some money on both vehicles. And each vehicle is quoted at $52,497.50 plus each one will require close to $15,000 in equipment added to it. So the first year, we'd have to put down $53,000, and then it would be $11,499.50 a year. The 4 years after that, so we'll need to pay $53,000 this year. There's currently $40,000 in the replacement line, is our understanding, and then another at least $15,000 coming from EMS for the vehicle, for the old chief's vehicle that was provided to them. We're also hopefully expecting a modest $2,500 around there for the Explorer. The chief said he would be happy to get $2,500 for that Explorer. So yeah, any questions or conversation on that?
Are you moving that, Keith?
Yes, I would move that. Sorry. I guess that's a more appropriate way to open the door to conversation.
So we have a motion to acquire by lease 2 police vehicles, one designated as the chief's vehicle, which we have provided to Chief Nelson since he began with us in 2018. We've recently gotten rid of it. We've recently repurposed his chief's vehicle to a different department for which there will be compensation. And then the other vehicle is to replace an already decommissioned Ford Explorer, which needed to be decommissioned quite badly. So Keith has made the motion to approve those 2. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any questions for Keith? Comments or conversations?
Why lease?
I haven't talked to Joe specifically about these 2, but I did the quick math on it. It looks like 1.9% financing. So leasing gives him the ability to get both. Buying it outright would not. And it's a lease to own, like the fire trucks.
So part of that also is that wasn't the situation they were already in, and it was a small increase for what was already an expenditure annually for lease. Just makes sense.
I mean, financially more, but yeah, I can see what you're saying. And they don't mind us altering it and doing all of that on the leased vehicle.
Technically, it's a lease purchase,
Right,
Oh,
because it's a lease to own.
lease to own, so basically finance purchase more so than a traditional lease where you turn the keys back in at the end.
Never. I have no experience with that. So they don't mind us,
No, it's just like a ladder truck. Pay for it over time.
Yeah, I'll just add that I know there was a fairly extensive amount of research put in on, again, looking at electric police cars, but again, the cost just at this point is I think basically it'd be a 2-for-1. Two vehicles would cost the same as one electric vehicle or somewhere in there. So we're continuing to consider that as an option. But Chief just doesn't think it's financially feasible yet.
Yeah, Joe did mention he did look at a couple of these, electric SUVs for the police department, and they're still north of 100. So it's
I mean, it would have to be grant funded to go that for sure. There's no world where we pay outright for an EP that would satisfy.
we need a rapid charging station too.
Yeah, or maybe a year early on this purchase.
Maybe at the end of these 5 years, the numbers will make sense, and there'll be some.
And wasn't the code a 3 years? I figured we have 3 years, so it's the code officer's car.
Yes.
Those are 3. So 3 years is the target. Please will have plenty of time.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving these two police vehicles, please say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay, anything else on police?
nope, that's it for me.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Next up, treasurer's office.
So we have collected all but 80,000 of the 2023 tax levy. And the new water bills will be going out in September, and we will cover other exciting things happening below in old business and new business. But we are on target to have the online water payment software program, which will also give insight into the users' accounts of their past account balance ledger as well as their consumption. And we're on target to do that for September 1st. Jen has already put out in the newsletter a link you can be able to update your email address should you want to sign up for email billing. And we'll reach out other ways. So everyone who's listening or watches later and wants to do that, you can contact our office to see how to do that if you can't find that information on the website. Yeah, I'm gonna save all of my words for sure. Does anyone have questions about the treasurer's office?
What about the tax software?
Tax software also, right? Water and tax plans, which is something that people were curious about. They could look at the Town of Ulysses website or Cuba Heights. Village of Lansing, all uses the tax plans program where you can look up what your tax payment is for the year. You can look up it historically if that part's been uploaded and you will be able to pay online. So for most of the people, that would be more relevant next tax year. But we'll save a tremendous amount of work for our office in terms of the payments that come from third party vendors and all the receipting and those sorts of things. So I'm super excited about that innovation. Yeah, thank you. Did you want to there have that? Now the clerk's office, same. We're excited about some innovations and there's some really good quotes Jen has. We isolated what we wanted to do, where we wanted to head, and the kinds of software we needed in collaboration with the departments and the needs of our office. And then Jen worked well with vendors to assess out and the mayor assess out what we file quotes, as you've already seen, and now we're coming back around with some IT improvements, so we are not hijacked by old desktop software. To say about that. Are there any questions for the clerk's office specifically?
I did hear from someone who tried to email about the water billing and maybe didn't get a response. I don't know, was there like a specific email?
Email address.
Yeah.
I have been checking,
Okay,
That's
But
the
that-
we just implemented that email address last.
Yeah,
But I,
but that may segue into our next piece, which is to update our IT.
there you go.
but if someone's inquired from you and didn't get a response, if you want to just send that. to
Yeah.
Clerk or deputy clerk, because I don't have any unanswered.
Maybe the
You should just
spam
know
or something, I don't know.
So right now, the way our Outlook works, like and it's now happening to Jen's email, you can be reading an email and it disappears.
Which is what happened when I was reading your email. I'm like,
Right,
remember? when
but
I
yeah,
told
you
you?
emailed me.
It
and-
like disappeared while I was reading it.
So it's entirely possible that when.
Yeah.
So send
Okay.
that along.
Yeah. Will do.
Anything for Jessica or Jen? From the board. Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 7, which is old business, starting with something that Jessica and Jen have been working on for several months now. Whichever one of you wants to talk about IT.
Jen should take the lead.
I will take the lead on this. So as a lot of you know, Jeff Burns supported our IT in the village office for many years. He did a fantastic job and he retired July 1st. So we needed to find someone to replace him. And so we looked at several different vendors, all within New York State. 2 are located in Tompkins County. One of the nice things about Jeff is he's continued to back up our servers, even though he stopped supporting our computers or he stopped supplying service to us July 1st. So we were looking for a vendor that had security, data backup. We want to implement Microsoft 360 and have regular tech support. So after talking to the different companies. We looked at Advanced 2000, HPM Tech Services, and Synergy. And we're really happy with what we heard from HPM Tech Services. They're based in Cuba Heights. They came with good recommendations from other municipalities, and Jeff is actually working with them right now to do a conversion from another one of his clients. So we are hoping that we can move forward with this company. They already have experience working with EMS, fire departments, and police departments. So that was a real bonus for us because not all the municipalities offer those services. And so we wanted somebody that really had the breadth of knowledge in those areas. So
We also had a competitive price point.
yeah, they're actually the least expensive of the vendors, though they were all within the same kind of band of pricing. And I don't think I can make a motion to move forward, but I would like to
What's the-
propose.
What's the dollar proposals,
Okay,
just for HP?
sure. So first year, we're looking at like $33,613.36, and then subsequent years about $15,832.92. So that's going to give us support of all of our departments. It's going to be really nice because we're going to be able to share more and work more as one big organization in terms of email and sharing files. Right now, we're kind of all in our little silos. And I think after talking with the different department heads and getting a real sense of what people's needs are, it's going to be so great for us to be able to really function as a village all together.
Oh man, wait till budget season. You guys. So good.
Yeah. We're pretty excited about this. Jessica and I both worked in 360 environments in the past, and I really think this is going to be fantastic for our organization. The pricing includes, remote monitoring and management, setup and labor. They're going to be doing, backing up all of our data.
Some equipment in that initial.
There's equipment as well. We need to replace some of the equipment we have, the servers. Yeah, so that we can be, building on kind of what Jeff has already laid down for us, but really kind of building that out more.
Does it include, I would sort of presume it doesn't include the subscription services and all of that, or is that?
It includes the Microsoft subscriptions as well as the security subscriptions, but it doesn't include like some of the
If you
unique.
want extra Adobe software and things like that.
Oh, yeah, that was something that would be separate. Yeah,
Yeah, but Office 365 suite.
I will say they do come highly recommended by Mayor Woodard of Cuba Heights. She's been very, very happy with them over the last several years. They're a similar size municipality with similar departments.
Yeah.
We have an EMS department, they don't, but they have a large police department.
I also spoke with the head of IT for Tompkins County on another topic, and we discussed HPM, and she had really positive things to say about them. So that was also reassuring because the police department, a lot of their resources are through the county, but they need to be integration with our IT here.
Question. So we have an IT services line that's not nearly large enough. The way we would do this is simply, we need a resolution to authorize me to sign the contract with HPM. And then they'll begin billing us. That line will go over budget, and then we'll have to do a budget modification at the end of the year to move some fund balance into that line to cover everything. It's not going to require moving money from reserves.
What is that budget? I mean, I'm sure this is many times when we compare Jeff.
It's many times when we can see.
Many times, that's maybe more than we want to know.
Yeah. So village IT is 2006. But that's because he'd already done the implementation, and he would have, had he stayed on, he would have needed to upgrade some of that.
Also,
Comments, questions, thoughts?
it is very exciting. I mean, it really will be. New, I don't know, a new era might be overblown somewhat, but it will certainly feel that way, I think, to me. I'm sure to you, actually, more than me. I'm excited. Excited. Long time coming.
It's gonna have implications on EMS. I mean, HIPAA compliance is something that they know how to do. If we were to ever lose our minds building a house. Their work with other law enforcement agencies will fit nicely with our need to share information with the DA's office, all that stuff.
It will definitely be difficult. I mean, that's beyond my experience using. 316 way that's. HIPAA compliant and safe.
Wouldn't even be 360, it would just be the back end IT piece. I don't think. Deb Watkins, we talk about this from time to time. I don't think we have the network infrastructure classifications, security classifications to do some of that. Payment processing. Which we wouldn't want to do, but if we wanted to, they can certainly. They can certainly do that. All right, well, then I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign a contract for services, which with HPM Tech Services.
So moved.
Second.
Any additional comments, conversation or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay, great. Next item under old business is MRB Stream Bank Stabilization Grant Admin Proposal. So MRB Group, as they have gotten very good at doing, submitted a grant application on our behalf, which I'm looking for. You have a copy of that, actually,
The grant itself for the proposal.
the proposal.
Yeah, it should be 7B in the Dropbox.
So when I and then.
Oh, there it is. So MRB did submit a something called a non-agricultural non-point source planning grant. I'm glad they found it because I wouldn't have known where to look for it, which we were awarded in the amount of, I believe, $30,000 to develop the engineering necessary to stabilize the south retaining wall of the creek where the Greg Street footbridge is. The grant requires administration, which we could do ourselves if we had the expertise, or MRB is willing to do for us for the amount of $3,500. And so the end result being that we will have at the end of all of this engineering, which tells us what to do with the wall. Can't fix the wall without the engineering to tell us what to do to fix it. And it'll also give us a likely cost estimate, which I'm sure will be as pleasant as you can imagine. And so I would entertain a motion. If there are questions, we can certainly discuss it, but I would entertain a motion to accept MRB's proposal for grant administration of the non-agricultural non-point source planning grant.
So moved.
Second.
Now, any questions?
I used to remember that small coming from MRB. It's very disorienting.
It's only
What I was reading.
It's only a $30,000 grant. So it's-
I'm old enough to remember when this bridge was going to be fixed in a week. I'm glad to see this, though.
Any other comments or questions?
No.
Okay, hearing none, then all in favor of accepting MRB's proposal for grant administration for the non-point source planning grant, please say aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next we have. What are we looking at here?
So this is a revised proposal for the comprehensive stormwater management plan. During the budget season conversations, I was going back and forth with MRB on how to break up this comprehensive stormwater management plan work over a number of budget seasons, so we could spread that cost around. This is reflective of where we ended during that discussion. You'll see the final budget plan is number 3. It's kind of in the middle, page 8, I guess, or sorry, page 7. So there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe different sections, and they're split across 4 years. But this is reflective of what we had discussed in the budget meetings. And so now this is MRB giving us an updated plan and proposals that we can approve it so that they can actually start making progress on the plan. Part of this, I think, is actually already taken place as they were doing some other field investigation for DPW, but this will allow us to actually start making forward progress on it.
Right, so thanks for refreshing my memory. So the total project scope for engineering only, develop a comprehensive stormwater management plan for the village is $78,500. We budgeted to break it up into 3 budget years, basically 3 budget years. So starting in the one we're in, which is June of 23 till end of next May, we do have in the budget $12,500. So this is reflective of that. Next year, we'll need to budget $24,500. The following year, $15,000, and then June of 26, we'll need to spend the last $26,500. And so we have already budgeted the 12.5, and it's not coming out of a reserve. So all I need tonight is a motion to authorize me to sign and accept this proposal as broken out.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? Comments?
So as I read through this, I felt like the deliverables were kind of foggy, like we come out of it with design guidelines. Like this is, my read of it was not that we get a comprehensive stormwater management plan, but that we get like a precursor that would then allow us. I don't know if I'm misreading that, but it felt like this was a preliminary, like an 8-step plan. And then the first step was being broken up into 6 steps. Sorry, that sounds very convoluted, but I just want to check that reading is correct. Is this intermediate, or is this we come out of it, in the end of 26?
The end of 26. The item, I mean, what a comprehensive stormwater management plan is in item E. So we'll have an inventory of existing infrastructure, recommendations for proposed improvements, updated drainage maps for the entire village, prioritize a list of possible projects, cost estimates for those proposed improvements, draft legislative policies surrounding stormwater management. That's the plan. Each individual improvement will then, of course, have to have its own engineering, its own funding cycle, depending on the size and scope. I think, and I'm guessing, but I think a lot of what they're going to discover is what we already know, which is a lot of this is on private property. So we'll be looking at things like ways to potentially collaborate on culverts in a particular area where private property owners could choose to run their drains, kind of thing. But that's what they're gonna tell us.
Again, I think it's just frustrating because a lot of the engineering will run into the same issue. It just feels like. Well, in any case, it is what it is. I mean, it feels like a very reasonable proposal. We're going through with, but I do think we should have some stormwater up until 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was a private issue for private homeowners, similar to the way the trees are. And I think it's important to call it out that this, even though this is very preliminary, is a sea change for the way that we address this. And Roy, you pointed this out in public as well, but I just want to reemphasize that this is new and different, far more proactive, and far more. It's a new tack to the village in a big way. So I support it, but I think it's worth couching that, and we may not execute on this at all. I think we need to be aware of that.
No, I agree 100%. There's a very strong theoretical argument and an ironclad legal argument. And I'm glad Guy's not here tonight. There's an ironclad legal argument and a strong philosophical argument that says your water on your property is your problem. And the taxpayer should never even sniff a red cent going to your private property problem. And that has been the village's position for decades. And I think the shift, which I'm happy to make, but the shift is, well, let's see, especially if we can spend it over time and maybe find some grant money in between. Let's see if there are things that the village as a whole can do to help. But not probably, to your point, not promising fixes, particularly on private property.
I think the thing I'm hoping to see come out of this is a much clearer understanding of like legislative policies. What can we do in land use and so forth that might help with additional development that was obviously concerning for additional runoff from that? What can we kind of regulate around that as we look into that? And where is our current infrastructure at? What are its, what kind of quality and level is it at? Where are we potentially missing infrastructure areas that, people would expect and would want and could make use of if it was there, that sort of a thing. So I don't see the first step as going into helping people with their backyards that are wet, but if their backyards are wet because there's no place to run a pump, pump it out to somewhere else on the street that could have been collecting it, or it's wet because there's water running from the street into their backyard that we could capture upstream. Like those are the things that I'm hoping to identify. Will we find tons of smoking guns that we can help fix? Probably not. Will we find some? Yeah. Will it be enough? I think that's what kind of remains to be seen. But I don't. It is a sea change in that we're proactively going after this and trying to address it and look into what's possible. And I think that's the responsible thing to go towards. And then we don't know where it leads us until we've kind of taken that step. But I think I'd love to see us move quicker. The amount of concern we hear about stormwater, I think this is the responsible speed that we can go for the budget costs that we're looking at, and we'll see where we end up at the other side of this. And at the very least, we'll have a lot more information. If private owners want to do something, we'll understand, why is your backyard wet? Well, it's because it's coming over here and it's going through there, and we'll have that sort of infrastructure and drainage maps and so forth that can really help that conversation. Even if private owners want to work amongst themselves, that can be informed by some of the information that we'll be collecting. So
at least the engineering part is done and they would know why and how. And how
Right.
to mitigate that on their own.
because we have a lot of conversations now of like, oh, it's probably coming from this way, or it used to come from that way. And now we'll have just, a better understanding of all these things that we can see where we can come as the village, and then private owners can see where they can do as private owners.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw with the study on the Larchmont Tamarack piece, now that we know what can be done, then it'll be up to those property owners to decide whether they're willing to agree to participate in the pursuit of it. And if we didn't know those things, then they wouldn't have anything to base that decision making on. So. No, so I'm certainly supportive of moving forward with it. But I agree with your point that this is a different approach than the village has taken in its previous 150 years, and its time has come, but we'll see what the answers are. So we have a motion and a second on the table to authorize me signing this proposal. And so if there are no additional comments or questions, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Any opposed? Okay, we have bill event in the EDU count for September sewer bill.
Yes, so there's a couple of different pieces to talk through for sewer, though in interest of this very lengthy meeting, I figure we can have more of them later because they wouldn't be implementing anything until probably next year at the earliest. The one change I did want to propose and make a motion for is to adjust our sewer. All right, I think we're good. I'm joining so I can present for the zoning stuff in a minute, and I should mute myself. There we go. Now we're good. Is to shift our sewer billing from currently we charge one sewer rate. We have basically a spreadsheet of all the sewer customers and how many sewer rates we charge them. For residential, that is typically per dwelling unit. For commercial, it is whatever number is there. It has drifted over years. Buildings have been repurposed in different ways and hasn't been updated, so on and so forth. So with the new sewer law that we passed a month or two ago, the intention is to shift that to an EDU per equivalent dwelling unit charge. So again, that is still per dwelling unit in a multi-unit or a single family home. So residential should largely be untouched with this change, but it would impact and standardize the charge for commercial uses based on how much water they're using. So it's basically the idea is an average house in the village uses 50,000 gallons per year. If you use 50,000 gallons per year as a business, you are charged one sewer unit. If you use 100,000, two, and so on and so forth. It is helpful to basically standardize and make a more fair and consistent charge for the commercial users. And this is something that we've mentioned a number of times along the sewer law adoption process to commercial users. We've sent them letters directly. It's been mentioned in the newsletter and so on and so forth. So I think in lieu of figuring out our new sewer rates and structure for that, and we've talked about, is there a water usage part of that and so forth, and we can continue that conversation at another meeting. I would like to make a motion that we shift our sewer billing rate to be based on EDUs, and then we can have that apply as of the September bill. I'll make that motion as long as we feel that's clear enough.
To be allowed in September billing in 2020.
Yeah, if that feels possible, that seems to,
Oh, yeah, just
Okay,
wanted to be clear about
the bills going,
changes and what might happen in 2024, which have been previously discussed versus.
right, this is just, right, so this is applying for the bills going on in September, and it is just this shift to, instead of sewer rates being whatever they historically have, or sewer, number of sewer units per account, whatever it's been historically will now be regularized to be per EDU.
Very good,
It's still a flat rate for EDU.
It's still the same flat rate, yep,
very good.
per
Okay.
EDU, exactly right.
So we have a motion and a second, in layman's terms, going from a stated, I have one sewer unit or I have two sewer units, to a calculated version, which should not impact residential, but may impact larger users. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm actually going to suggest that we hit the pause button on old business because there are items under new business. I don't want to shortchange our conversations on E and F under 7. There's some items under new business, which are approvals that I want to make sure we get done tonight. So if there's no objection, I'm going to pause old business, switch gears to new business. Speaking of exciting proposals out of the main office, thank you, Jess and Jen. Item 8A is, I'll once again turn over to Jessica and Jen to describe what exactly we're talking about with a proposal for codification services.
So I'll lead in with the explanation of what that means, and Jen has the details on the quote and what the service will provide. So the county engaged, Tompkins County engaged in laserfiche of docs, so laserfiche storage of documents, which then is, you know, a searchable database that's really brilliant. Adobe to the nth, fantastic reality, and they are already paying for us to be a member of that. We have access to do that. What we then need to do is get our records uploaded to become digitized. The part that was of particular interest to this board in prior discussions had been that we would then have an easier way to codify our laws because they would be all then digitized, and that makes changing them different. And so to that end, and at the mayor's directive, Jen picked up the thread with general code to see where we were in that process and what that would cost.
I'll add just a little bit of backstory. I've had conversations with Guy over the years about his concerns about our many and varied and dispersed local laws over 100+ years. The Secretary of State of New York has our local law records going back to maybe the 60s.
Yeah.
But there's older laws on the books, which will take some research. Moving to, you've searched law in any other municipality, you'll often see E-code 360. So it's moving to a village code versus a village that has multiple local laws is what this effort does. I'm not entirely sure of the legal piece. I believe what needs to happen, or what this proposal addresses, is the itemization of all of our local laws which are in effect. And then I believe, and this is where Guy will come in, I believe there is a singular local law which is then passed, which adopts the code and repeals all prior local laws. And then what that does is it makes the code itself searchable. It also allows us to modify, if necessary, portions of code more easily than going through the local law adoption process and repealing the old local law. If that's not done correctly, then you've got two competing local laws on the books, that kind of stuff. So this is something that I've been looking into for a couple of years, and then handed it off to Jen to really kind of take the ball and run with it. And this is the proposal. That's the result. So
I'll also mention that creating a unified development code, which I think this is or is very close or is a step on the way towards, it was definitely explicitly called out in the comp plan as something that we want to see done for transparency and accessibility reasons.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm looking at the E-code product, which is put out by General Code, and it's the codification service that many of the local municipalities use. Most of them in Tompkins County use them. So if you want to view what it looks like, you could go to Village of Cuba Heights, Town of Dryden, Village of Groton, and look to see how they've codified their laws. This particular software package it does several things. One is they do an organizational analysis. So we have digitized versions of our laws, but what they'll do is really compile everything, assess what is code, what's non-code, repeal or supersede provisions are eliminated, amendments are inserted as necessary. So make sure that the information that we have out there is actually the most current version of the laws that you all have worked on, making sure that people can easily view and understand what the village has put forth in terms of legislation. They also do a legislative evaluation. So they have editors that review and analyze the legislation, make sure there's no conflicts, duplications, inconsistencies, and make sure they're compliant with statutory requirements. In addition, they do a code review, again, look at legal analysis, digital manuscripts. And then they do, basically they create a code adoption. So approved information is incorporated into a draft for our approval and adoption. General Code prepares and provides an adopting ordinance. So that would be what we would, you would pass then to put this into place. And then the code delivery. So it's then the platform, the online platform that has the code out there. You can also get print copies if that's something that people would prefer, also have copies. So the yearly annual maintenance for this service, and this would be, really kind of serving up the platform and also making sure everything, once we get it all set up, that everything stays current and anything new that gets adopted is incorporated. That's $1,195. The project price is a total of $13,995, but it comes in several steps. So there's step one, where you have to put a certain amount down. I think it's 20% down when you sign. And then step two, so that would be like $2,700, $3,000. Step two, submission of organizational analysis, you pay that within 80 days of signing the contract. So it kind of breaks it up. Step three is when you pay the biggest chunk of it. And then finally, step five is delivery of code. So they try to break it up incrementally, so you're not paying it all right at once. And like I said, I looked at a lot of the other municipalities to see what they were using. And also, they included a list, but I wanted to see, because I wanted to see how it's searchable. It's a nice platform. It's a great way to offer up the legal documents that we have. It's searchable. We do have some of them digitized, but not all of them. And really making sure that we're confident in what we have out there is really the most current versions of our laws. That is my presentation.
I did actually want to bring the board's attention to the line there for $311, which would be the implementation of gender neutral language. I just wanted you to see if that's something to add to your discussion. And then to point out that, as Jen noted with the stages, that the annual service fee does not begin until it is first posted. So they do all this work, and then once that's there, that's when your year clock starts.
Right.
Because $1,195 is important to us.
That's right.
Looks like we will be the 8th, if we approve this, we will be the 8th Tompkins County municipality, including the county itself, to use their service. So we're not the first, we're not the last either. There are 17 municipalities in the county. So we're right in the middle of the pack. Any comments, thoughts, questions?
I'll say, just because it needs to be said, that this is a no-brainer in my mind. This simplifies everything. I can't imagine from a liability perspective what not doing this subjects us to, although that's not a justification I like to use. But I've looked for model laws a million times, and it's always this service that comes up. I think this is unequivocally the way to go, and I would frankly pay twice as much for it. I think they're leaving money on the table. I don't know why that is what it is, but they've already given us the quote.
They've already given us.
You can help by approving the gender neutral language in the code add on.
Yeah.
That's also feels
I think
a
it's
weird thing to leave. Yeah.
Fair, yeah.
No, but truly, it's so difficult. When we were doing the street law and I was trying to look, well, do we have any laws on the books? There's literally no way, but I don't know. That's why we have all of these strange repealers at the beginning of our law. It's like.
And also from
Unequivocally, right.
to echo that from the first standpoint, when we want to serve the public, when they come in and want to see something about a law, to be able to have that at our fingertips instead of at our fingertips in boxes and other places, is a tremendous public service.
Well, and Tom found that there was a law that we didn't know about. What was the last?
Floodplain. I think it was a floodplain thing. No, I think we had it and the state reminded us that we had it, but thankfully it had already been basically included in our zoning, but it was like,
But only kind of.
but maybe only by mistake. Like, it was not a great
Things like
feeling.
that are- That's to be.
I'm very intrigued to see what we find as we start digging through boxes and digitizing.
I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited.
I'm terrified.
Any other thoughts? Okay, if there are no other comments, then I would entertain a motion to authorize me signing this proposal. No.
Contract.
Think about the wording for a second. So I would then entertain a motion to accept the proposal from General Code for the proposal for a codification services for the village.
Oh,
Second, friendly amendment to include the gender neutral language and code section.
Amendment. Okay, no objection to the friendly amendment. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item under new business. The Federal Department of Transportation Alternative Program, TAP for short, is scheduled to be released in the next month or two in terms of what their funding is for various projects. This is the big dollar grant for large sidewalk projects. There are some nuances to it with respect to who can do your engineering, who can do your proposals, and have you done certain things. Or are you just using the same firm over and over and over again? So MRB, because we do use them over and over again for certain things, suggested that we send out a request for qualifications, basically an RFP for services. This would be administered through Municipal Solutions. They're the ones that would send it out. Engineering firms and others would be able to respond, including MRB. We are on a timeline for it. So we would be approving the RFQ tonight. The RFQ would be published this week. One of the requirements of the various TAP grants is that we have canvassed MWBE, minority and women-owned business entities. We have canvassed them to make sure that they are included in our process to select an engineer. Statements of qualifications will be due by the Tuesday after Labor Day, September 5th. We will review those responses at our September 11th meeting, and then we will select an engineer at our second monthly meeting in September. It's expected that the TAP grant application process is likely, although not guaranteed, to open in September because it's tied to the federal budget. At which time the firm we select will be able to apply for this potentially very large grant for us. Target sidewalk project is West Main Street from the farmers market to Seneca Road, possibly to include portions of Seneca Road, east and west. Don't have any idea what it'll cost. Probably something in the $3 to $5 million range. So with that said, I would entertain a motion to accept the RFQ as presented to us for services related to the TAP grant application cycle.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
I assume Municipal Solutions does all of the solicitations for MWB and all of that. They do all of the detail. They're the ones that send it out. We don't have any other parallel process or anything that we have to do.
They are, as our fiscal agent, they're the ones who wrote the RFQ. We're approving it. They send it out.
And then we collect the solutions. That's the window.
Yeah, you're the trustee and next.
Other questions or comments? Jess, if you would make a note, the RFQ itself, you could edit
Okay.
the address to which it's being sent.
Okay.
Currently, it says 86 East Main Street. The 8 is right above the 5 on that side of the keyboard. So.
Okay, I'll get with Mary tomorrow.
Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving this RFQ to be sent out for TAP grant application process, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Yeah, so you'll have to get that to Mary tomorrow.
Yeah.
To edit. Last item of new business is code enforcement local law.
Yes, so this is just to introduce this law. So a little bit of background, New York State passed updated minimum standards for administration and enforcement. There's a little flyer in the Dropbox about it. This updates some minimum standards for administration and enforcement and requires local municipalities that enforce code to update their local laws to reflect the new minimum standards. Our local law is minimal or non-existent. Maybe we'll find out when we codify everything. But there is a model law that the state recommends. And this new rule went into effect the end of last year. So we're a little bit delinquent on this. But I've been working with Tom and Guy to draft up a new local code enforcement law, which is what's in the Dropbox. It's a little bit lengthy, but it has gone through Guy's review and has been seen by Tom. And so if we'd like to this evening, we could consider scheduling a public hearing on this, or we could just see it as introduced and discuss more details at a later time, seeing as we're trying to keep as much time as we can for other conversations.
No, I would consider it introduced and set the public hearing for it. I don't see any reason, I mean, whether we do it in September or October.
Yeah.
Coin flip, but
Yeah.
I don't see any reason not to schedule it. Guy has mentioned it a couple of times.
So I have a couple of questions before we do that.
Yeah.
There's operating permits for welding. There's a couple of pieces that are like real head scratchers. There's a whole section on parking garages.
I did not, that was
And it's so
interesting.
to me, it feels like. So, I'm sure they read through it, but like, I would like to take out the things that don't matter and that are a little bit bizarre, like. Welding really stuck out to me that if you weld at your house, which I know a lot of people do, then you would need an operating permit to continue to do that. I feel like that's very inappropriate, and it's possible I'm just reading it wrong. But that's what it looked like to me. If it was me, I would just, me alone. But let me rephrase. If I was Tom, I would want to take out the whole operating permit section. Because it seems like a lot of extra work, and it's somewhat strange to me, but again, hopefully I'm reading that wrong. I don't know. But I think before we.
I don't know if we want to remove sections that Guy has left in.
The welding one does say, I believe it says, or where performed by the occupant of a detached 1 or 2 family dwellings. I think if it's in your own home. But I'm reading it very quickly at this moment. Insiders. And operating permit is not required where work is conducted under the authorization of a building permit or where performed by an occupant of a detached 1 or 2 family dwelling. So you can't do it in your apartment, but you can do it in your house.
So the part that really gets me is that Tom's job.
I mean, it seems to me that the state very much thinks
New
so,
York State says it is.
because this is largely based on the model law from the state. We could, I mean, by all means, I would have a conversation with Guy if you're curious, but my impression, and I haven't dug deeply on this in any means, is that this is mostly stock requirements from the state as to like what it means to be administering code.
See, the welding is easy because the code enforcement officer is also, although you can have someone else do fire inspections, code enforcement officer is responsible. So you're doing something which theoretically could violate fire code.
Right, but only you would only have a fire inspection in a commercial context, right? So this is governing a whole subsection of residential uses.
Right. 100% New York State is absolutely wanting to push the oversight over those areas where they've traditionally not had oversight.
That was.
I mean, I'm happy to schedule the public hearing. We can pick the public hearing date next month if we want. If you have questions, I would send them to Guy or talk to Tom about it and send it to Guy because Tom doesn't charge by the hour.
Why don't we do
I will. I mean, to me, I find that very. I don't like that at all. That makes me very uncomfortable. So I certainly will.
How about the second September meeting?
Do you want to wait to schedule the public hearing?
I mean, we might as well schedule and then reschedule, right? Like if it is something that we're just, I mean, I will either vote against it.
Right.
If it's
Well, I mean-
mandatory, I will vote against it just because.
I mean, I think that the hearing can happen regardless, and we can hear more information. We can always change it before
I don't.
we make any final decision. I'm kind of picking a number out of my hat. I don't have a strong
Yeah, there's some need to.
sense of
modify it,
when.
just change it,
Yeah,
Push it back.
So we're looking at September 25. Is our regularly scheduled village board meeting. So if you want to notice a public hearing on proposed local law something of 2023.
The welding specifically does come from the model law. I just checked it real quick. But again, I don't know if that means it has to be there, but you can have a conversation with Guy.
Yeah, I'm sure the whole thing came. Like I know.
The section 9 or something was the one that Tom and Guy went back and forth over the most, and I don't remember. I didn't really follow why per se, but I just
Which section of thing?
scrolling.
It's procedures on unsafe buildings, structures and
Yeah.
equipment and conditions of immediate date of imminent danger.
Pretty sure that's the
That
one
one
I
I find very interesting. So that allows them to compel the demolition or but itself to hire a third party contractor.
just goes Hulk mode and just starts.
No, you can hire someone and then
Well,
you
yeah.
bill and levy it against their taxes. It's
Yeah.
very aggressive. The whole thing is very aggressive. I don't object to that piece as much as the operating permit piece, but it's definitely a new tact for a code enforcement officer to them.
I mean, I'd be curious to know
Even
how.
us, I don't think it's that new.
Right, sure. Yeah, I think larger municipalities have done it this way. For some time.
And well, this is where I'm curious to know what our local law was and how much already was effective just because of the state, at the state level that trickled down to us with or without a local law. These are questions I don't have any insight into, but I'm curious about.
I know for that piece, it didn't exist before.
Okay.
I looked into that because I had some that I wanted to compel demolition.
Yeah,
Or at least keep the like.
And is this going to be on the website for people to view?
it is currently in the
Wait.
agenda packet, but we can,
It'll be part of the public hearing
Public
announcement.
hearing.
it'll be part of the
Okay.
public hearing announcement too, yeah.
So September 25, 7 PM, public hearing on that. Okay, any other items of new business? That did not make the cut onto the agenda. Hearing none. Back to old business. I'll hand it off to you, Ben, and I think you are.
Yes,
You are.
like I was.
Or some
All
zoning
right,
recommendations
let
from
me-
CPZR.
Give me a second. This up. All right, so first I wanted to walk through a set of proposed residential edits from CPZR. Actually, maybe before that, I'll kind of give a little overview of where we are and what we're talking about. So after the public hearing for the zoning law in front of this board, we asked the CPZR committee to look into this effectively two things. One, if there were any recommendations for potential edits after hearing feedback from the public hearing, and two, to create a set of proposed lot dimensions in concert with EDR doing additional survey and kind of review, not on the ground, but digital survey of the village and lots to better understand exactly what's currently built and how different scenarios might impact the village one way or another. So I'd like to start first with reviewing some of the proposed edits that we might consider adopting. I'll share my screen here so that maybe everyone can see. Say it again. Does sound like maybe I'll pull my mic just a little bit. It feels a little hot. Yeah. So what I was thinking is I would kind of walk through these at a high level and discuss the change and why, like what the what the motivation was for the change. And then I thought that we could come back around, and if there's areas that we want to discuss as a board in more depth, we can kind of do that. So I'll try and be brief and then we can come back around. First change, these are just in order of the existing document, allowed uses. This is suggesting removing the carve out for special regulations for accessory dwelling units. I'll talk more about that when we get to like the actual section about it, but this is kind of follow up from that concept. Same with section 302. So we'll talk about ADUs in a minute. Also, as part of dimensional requirements, the idea to add an maximum impervious surface. So this is in response to some of the stormwater conversation that we've had. If you were to blacktop your entire lot, that would obviously make a stormwater impact. This is based off of the model, American Planning Association's model ordinance for village development. They have a lot of recommended kind of, dimensional requirements and so on and so forth. Their suggestion here is 60% for impervious surface. And they like to keep it generic at impervious. So that's your house, your driveway, so on and so forth. Let's see if we can. I mean, I can. The question is, can you still read it? So let's see if we can make that possible. Is that okay? There we go. And then I can actually, I don't need to see people. So let me do this. That'll work. Next was a concern about 3-story buildings. We don't have many, if any, in the residential district. It's theoretically possible to kind of shove a flat roofed 3-story building into 35 feet. So this is making it more clear that the maximum height requirement is actually 2.5 stories and 35 feet, to clarify that, where there's some concern again about 3-story buildings. This section 303 is just a bit of a clarification. As you'll see, there's some conversation about multiple houses or multiple buildings on a lot. When you start thinking about that, sometimes the language is a little imprecise. So just being very clear what building you're talking about, but this doesn't change anything in that section per se. Same thing with front setbacks. This is a good continue to try and clarify this idea of infill development has to be generally in line with the other houses that it's next to, as far as how far away or close to the street it is. This is all existing in the current proposal that we discussed in a public hearing about. This is just trying to be more clear about that because it was a bit wordy as we continued looking at it. There was some concern expressed about traffic and parking for home-based businesses. There had been some talk of that in the current 2012 zoning. Some of that had been removed. In the proposal, a lot of it was for various reasons. It's tricky to get into regulating businesses. You have to regulate the use and not like hours and different things. So there was some that had been removed, but there was definitely concern that was brought up. And so this is a section brought back in based again on the American Planning Association's model ordinance to try and address some of the traffic and parking concerns that were brought up. All right, so I'll talk about accessory dwelling units. So this is a rather large, meaningful change. The committee, after hearing all the feedback around density and concerns around parking with ADUs and so on and so forth, has suggested that we remove the accessory dwelling section altogether. So that doesn't mean that we no longer allow accessory dwelling units. They have been and continue to be allowable. They don't get a special kind of benefit, which the proposal had given them, which was no parking and no additional lot size requirements. So now if with this change, you can still have an accessory dwelling unit. You just have to make sure that you have the right amount of lot space for 2 units. You would have to have the amount of parking for 2 units. So it continues to be a possible development type that people can have, but it doesn't get any kind of special bonus or special benefit from the law. So that helps to essentially reduce some of the density that was being added by giving additional ability to build dwelling units without that additional lot size and without that additional parking.
And that would calculate into the impervious surface.
That would still be part of impervious surface. Yep. Yep. This is another exactly word for word the same section up here, but we have two different sections, one for professional offices, one for home businesses. So the same treatment about traffic and parking. And this is another fairly meaningful in my mind change. Our zoning has no mention of design requirements in the residential section. You can build your house any which way you'd like. There is a lot of concern expressed about the look and feel of houses and what could you build if you really wanted to build something not in keeping with the village that was rather hostile to the front. You have a building with no windows and no front door that's just a big slab of a side of a house. You know, these sorts of things are not prevented in our zoning. They're never been presented in our zoning. They also don't happen any, if at all, in the village. But after a lot of conversation, the CPZR came around to the idea that there isn't any harm in being explicit about what we kind of expect a house to look like. It should have a front door that faces the street, should have some sort of, or, you know, stoop or porch or something there that kind of engages with the front street. If it is going to be something larger than a single building, a single unit house, it should look kind of like other 2, 3, 4 unit houses in the building, in the village. Or there's also a well-regarded website called Middle Missing Housing that kind of documents what do these types look like, how big are they, where does parking go, these sorts of things. And so it references that as a guide for if you're going to build something larger, maybe an 8-unit house, if you've got the space, 8-unit apartment building, how do you structure that to fit in as best you can in a desirable manner. So this is a step in the direction of having some design requirements to kind of say, here's what we kind of expect a house to look like, without being overly about, you know, the color of your roof tiles and the side of your shingles and that sort of a thing. So it's trying to find that middle ground. It is also, again, based largely on American Planning Association model zoning ordinance, and then kind of bringing in that missing middle housing.
So the expectation would be if you're gonna build a building of that size, it would have to look more like a house than a brick something or other.
Well, so it would have to look like a house or something like what's described in this kind of template, this set of different, actually bring it up. Bring up this one. So it doesn't talk about building types. It doesn't say you can't have brick, right? We do have brick buildings
Yeah,
in the
I'm just
building.
thinking like a bricks.
Right, but it does talk about, all right, let's see. It does talk about kind of, you know, what are the dimensions? How do these things try to look? How how big they are, that sort of a thing. I'll make this a little bit bigger too.
So like instead of a flat roof, a pitched roof.
It doesn't even
get
go
down
that far. It's really just saying that we want to see things that are kind of what you expect a duplex or a fourplex to look like, rather than.
So I think this cuts out the extreme, right? This cuts out something that looks like a bunker.
Right, that's what I was
But
alluding to.
But that's
Right. It's a light touch for sure. And I think it probably doesn't go as far as some would like to see. But it does stop the extreme. Like when I think about what is it stopping that I would be uncomfortable with is a house that has no front entrance from the street, that's like just a garage and maybe their entrance is only in the back and it feels very detached from the neighborhood and it breaks up that sense of trying to build a community and a neighborhood feel. So the thing for me that's most interesting is that sense of having a front face of the building that has some sort of porch, stoop, public entrance sort of thing. And then I'm trying to think of like what other, I guess the other concern that I've heard from some people is getting a larger property and building like 4 large individual houses on it that are not kind of a cohesive fourplex, or, you know, it just feels like you've made one yeah, one set of 4 large houses that are all kind of disconnected from the street, except for maybe the one up front, and wanting to have something to hold on to from the planning board's perspective to say, like, that's not what we were looking for. We're looking for some of these more multi-unit buildings or something else that fits more into the keeping of the neighborhood, like looks more like a house or something like that. It's yeah, so it's like you said, I think you said it well. It is removing the extreme.
It's also significant, I think, to point out that if you did have a large space and the setback was such that you could put now a garage in front, street side, you couldn't put the back end of it there. That would then be just a box building, no door, right?
Right,
So
yeah,
that would be better. I mean, that's not insignificant.
yeah, I think,
Have a corner lot, take the house down, put up 4 units, all with the back end facing the streets and
Right.
an inner courtyard.
yes.
So that's
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for me, it came down to having a way that engages with the street, because that
Yeah.
is what makes and creates that neighborhood feeling. And so that was the biggest thing for me, the concerns about larger multiplex buildings. A little hard to really know where that can go wrong, but I'm sure it can. And hopefully by showing people that we are, I think if you say, the missing middle housing piece has enough is known well enough in development and planning space that I think if you come in and see a zoning ordinance of references that, people say, okay, they want to see something that's engaging and interesting and fits in with kind of a surrounding sense and is built to scale and is not some large monstrosity. And I think those things will hopefully carry through, and it gives the planning board, because any of this would go in site plan review, right? At that point, once you get over 2 units, it's going to go to site plan review. There's something for the planning board to kind of point back at and say, this is what we were going for. Let's talk about that when we're having this site plan review. So that's the kind of intent there. Irregular lots. This was a request to add a frontage line to make that more clear in the diagram, what a frontage line means. Lag lots was a change to go back to 30 feet of space from all the property lines. There was some concern about flag lots being a little too close to people's backyards. Yard structures, this is just a clarification change. We got a little sidetracked in talking about yards versus required yards. It was a whole thing. We cleared it up. Same with this next one, required yards here. And then the last kind of major change, there's a couple small ones after this, is the principal buildings on a lot. There's been a lot of conversation about a cottage court sort of idea where you can have a number of smaller little houses on one lot that share that lot for reduced cost reasons and for shared efficiency of a parking and sorts of other different things. I think you have mentioned about like the kind of bungalow court sort of situation.
Right,
So
like
like
little pocket neighborhood sort of
little
things.
pocket neighborhoods, any of those things. That building type is 4, 6, 8 little buildings on one lot. And so when we looked at allowing that sort of development style in different areas, the current wording in this permissible building on the lot piece didn't work because it needed a lot more space between all the buildings. In that development, you kind of have a little cozy neighborhood. They're a little tightly together. So this is basically removing this requirement that they be very spaced out. And then just as says you need site plan for that. You would already need site plan if you had more than 3 or more of them, but this is saying you need site plan even if you have 2 large buildings on a lot. So this is, again, there's a lot of concern about maybe
Maybe.
No.
Keith, can you hear us? Keith.
Now I can.
All right.
We had a power out.
Seems to say, it, yeah.
Oh, it's laptop.
It says we are, but you know, I don't necessarily believe that. That's what I know. Right, in a cold day.
I get dry mouth.
All right, I'm gonna,
Does look. Okay. We're good.
all right,
Those following. We had a brief power out. But I think.
uh, have a primary building and 800 square, that's fine. Residential buildings on a lot that has to go through site plan as well. I think there's been some concern. We're not actually saying no per se, but site plan review would be required. That's kind of outside the normal realm enough to require that. But building 800 square feet, small grounding, getting rid of the whole ADU piece. This affordable housing change was a recommendation from county planning, recognizing that housing prices continue to increase ever so. And that while we used to aim for renters and homebuyers paying no more than 30% of their income for housing, the reality is 35 is becoming unfortunately more and more common. And so to adjust our affordable housing definition to recognize that. Frontage was a ask for clarity on frontage definitions from the community. Half story is a definition because we added the idea of having 2.5 stories. So we added up a definition for it. And the yards was again our maturations about yards and where they are. But it matches the image that we now have that's much clearer than really words ever were anyhow. And so we're just kind of clarifying that with this change. So that was the speed run. These changes. I guess the question is, are there any sections we'd like to dive into more?
Thoughts or comments for Ben?
Curious about the impervious surface thing.
Mm.
My one anchor in that discussion and trying to picture that is that right now the village is about 50% tree canopy.
Mhm.
And I'd like to keep it that way. And I prefer to move that to about 50 or to lower it somewhat, but I'm curious what 60% looks like, because to me that's a huge number.
Yeah, it's a good point, and we didn't dig into this in any depth is the reality. This is not a thing that we currently have. And so my thought is to kind of start with a model and then see where that goes. The idea being something's better than nothing that we currently have. The APA model zoning ordinance suggests 60, and I can actually, maybe I'll bring that up because they have a little comment about it. So let me find that real quick. This one, I forget. No, that's not what I wanted to bring it. Here. Yeah, I'll try and make it bigger in a second here. So they say maximum impervious coverage. Is here, they have a little bit of a table here. So I guess they do say for lots greater than 600 square feet, that goes to 50 in their recommendation. That's for a central residential area, which is like a downtown in their mind. We're more of the village residential area, which is where the 60 came from. But again, these are kind of a bit of a guess. I thought they had, so some of these you'll see there's commentary on some of these. I thought they had it for the impervious coverage, but they may not. So I think we were just kind of going off of that line in the recommendation, but I agree. I think it is again, removing the most extremes. I don't think it is honing in on exactly how low can we go, because we didn't really dig too far deep into what's the like number borne out by a lot of data and research.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'll look into that a little bit more. So I think one of the things I would like sort of, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the idea of playing with parking, and one of the benefits of not requiring parking explicitly is fewer impervious services. So as we're thinking about stormwater, and and to me, this is, well, it's one of the pieces that I'm curious about. I mean, obviously this is new, so I hadn't really thought about the filter mechanism before, but
And I will say, this is part of what I'm hoping to see eventually come out of the kind of term was, but basically I'm expecting them to propose some sort of local ordinances or laws or, adjustments that we can make. Which is why we didn't dig too terrible, like as much of an important issue as this is, we hadn't dug too deep into it in the initial proposal, knowing that this was coming down the road, but it felt that there was enough concern that what we could do in the meantime is at least bring this piece in and say, here's a placeholder while we work on trying to get more information.
I think that's fair. I mean, the idea being that this is something we update more than once every 12 years. So.
Yeah, right. And what's nice of this kind of continual zoning update is that down the road, we can fold that in, hopefully in rather short order.
Other thoughts?
I mean, I'll say just while we're chatting, I like the removal of ADUs. I think as an idea, I think it was sort of, I don't want to say a red herring, but we've trimmed again some of the excesses, I think, or at least the perceived excesses that sort of came out of the last meeting. And also, I think the bigger thing is we've removed a very confusing term. And I like that. I like both of those things. So
yeah,
I think that's a good change. I'm sure that was a hard one too for the committee, having put so much time into researching and thinking that through.
It was. There was months and months of work on that section for sure. But I think the simplicity is not the driving factor per se, but isn't to be undersold, that like we do aim to make this a very understandable and readable code, and that was adding quite a bit of complexity when you start layering different things on top. And I think that in my mind, I prefer fewer number of kind of key elements fit together nicely, and this felt like kind of an addition on top that maybe it could become down the road that this becomes a valuable and it's presents itself, but I don't think it was, once we got to the end, necessary to bring in just yet.
Keith, any thoughts?
No, your audio's been a little bit choppy, but I got the gist. But no thought this time.
Oh,
Think we'll get kicked by John.
no, I don't think so. Or if you do, I'll just be very quick. And we're gonna switch Wi-Fi's. All right.
How is it now? So at this point, that is, unless there's anything that board wants to get into the weeds on, are you looking for our sense of whether to include these changes in the official draft? Or what's-
Yeah, that was my idea. I mean, I wasn't entirely sure on the mechanism. I was suggesting maybe a motion to adopt these into the draft. And then I can go make those updates, but that was where I was going, unless you want to propose a different kind of proposal or mechanism to go forward. But my sense of this is that the CPCR has suggested these to us as a board. It is now completely with our decision how and what we do with them. Having worked on putting them together, I'm partial to them, but I think one way or another, we have to decide whether they go in or not into the draft law as an update. We can take all or none or some of them.
So we wouldn't need a resolution to include something in a draft that was presented to us by the CPCR in the first place.
Fair.
So I guess it's more, if there's no objection. We would be saving you the time, we would be saving the CPCR the time of incorporating these changes that the CPCR wants to make, only to have us reject them. By simply saying, none of us have any objections to this,
Right.
to amending the draft with these changes.
Okay.
There's nothing for this board to resolve to do until we have the next draft to discuss. So to speak.
Oh, I see. Maybe I misunderstood how we were kind of suggesting.
I mean, if there's no objections to these changes from this
Right.
board tonight, then I would think the next step would be to incorporate them into the draft. You don't need approval to do that.
Okay.
Right.
We'll bring the draft back to this board. We'll have to schedule another public hearing
Right.
because we made substantive changes to what we had before. If we want to consider.
So maybe the way to I think we're on the same page. I guess I was assuming this was effectively the way to describe the new proposed draft, that this is the new draft that is being proposed to this board. Here's the kind of diffs to show it. I think there is still the next item on our agenda to consider before that draft is kind of solidified enough to then talk about a public hearing, or at least, pushing it back into the community or something.
But any objections from members of this board on any of the suggested changes we've seen tonight?
No, because it'll come up for discussion again, right? The seconds, yeah,
Nothing's done until we vote on the final
Exactly.
bill.
yeah,
Yeah.
But if you see something you hate and you say, I don't want to see this in the new draft,
right.
and that would be.
Yeah, right now would be the time to.
Definitely gets harder and harder to object. As we move through. Psychologically, maybe more than
Yeah,
technically, but it. You have objection.
no, I'm good for now. I waffle on a few, but not enough to make.
Yeah,
a
and
huge objection.
and keep thinking and talking, like, I mean, to Roden's point, I think the next step, we've got a little more conversation this evening, with the next step is getting this packaged into a clean draft and putting it out again and having another public hearing on it, and then maybe that's the time we take a vote on it or not, it's up to us how we want to drive this at this point. All right, so then the next one is not mention alternatives, so. This larger. Trying to think through, give me a second here. Help, that's in the way. So the other question that we proposed to the CPCR was to provide a set of alternative lot sizes for this board to consider when it comes to lot size requirements. What the arc of that story was, we as a board approved spending money with EDR to do additional data collection on lots in the village. They went essentially lot by lot. You take a lot, you figure out what its frontage size is, what the frontage of the building is, how much is on one, how much frontage left over on one side and the other. And that allows you to start thinking about these different scenarios. How do they play out? How many lots could you actually subdivide? How many lots, based on where the building is placed on the lot and so forth. With different requirements. Do you need 30 feet of frontage, 40 feet, so on and so forth. That then resulted in a whole Excel spreadsheet of all that data. The committee kind of played around with the data in a couple of different ways and came up with a set of alternatives for this board to consider. And so I'll just kind of walk through them a bit, and then I can also show, these are, I can make them a little larger, obviously, kind of the visualization of what these different scenarios look like. We've kind of got a visualization of it, which I think is helpful to some degree, and also for people who like numbers a little bit better, we've got some numbers as well. So the committee came up with 4 different alternatives. I'll start at the top. Option A is, what if we were looking for kind of an extreme on one end of, how low can you go on frontage size and setback requirements? Now, this isn't like wildly off, out of left field extreme. This is, the APA model, that's American Planning Association model for villages, that same document I've referred to a couple of times. It's fairly in line with that. It's also fairly in line with the smallest of lots that are in the village. It's not any smaller than the smallest of lots in the village. But it does kind of show you one sense of one side of the range per se. Option B is much more in keeping with the current proposal. It's, in fact, I think exactly the same, except the side setback is slightly smaller. Because when you talk about requiring 15 feet on both sides, that's 30 feet, 10 for 40. If you've got a 40-foot frontage, that leaves you 10 feet for a building, which is very narrow. It doesn't quite make a lot of sense. So that was a second option. This again is, in keeping with what the original proposal was. It's targeting most, but not the smallest amount of what's in the village, but it's definitely not any smaller than what's in the village. And then option C was a step back from that, is the idea of, what if we keep that 15-foot side setback? You'll want 50-foot frontage to make you give enough space in the middle to actually build a house, and kind of line that up with, again, what's built in the village, targeting more like 97% of what's in the village. And then option D is our current zoning, which is 100 feet and 15-foot setback. So it kind of gives us a sense of where we are, and then what are some alternatives on top of that. In the columns here on the right-hand side, this is the data that we now have coming out of the EDR work, is that we can say with a lot higher confidence, when we look at these different scenarios, what percentage of built lots in the village could be subdivided, and what percentage of empty lots in the village are now buildable, right? So you don't have to subdivide an empty lot, but a lot of them are too tiny, or don't have access to them. They're landlocked in the middle of other lots, or whatever it might be. So you get to see that, under our current zoning, only 10% of built lots in the village could be subdivided, and a new house and a new lot could be put up for sale. And only 40% of empty lots are buildable. And then as you go up, you see it's kind of 30, 40, 60% in this column roughly. And this is like 40, 55, 60% on this side. So that kind of is the numbers I was at least looking for, is understanding what are we really talking about at these different types of scenarios. And we did include a couple comparisons here, like I mentioned, the APA model and just Fall Creek is something that we all kind of have a bit of a visual and felt sense of what that feels like, and the zoning for Fall Creek as well.
And then, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
was talking about how much your base street, we're not talking about front yard setbacks.
That's correct. Frontage is the width of your lot
Okay.
across the street. Yeah. So, right.
And currently it's 100 feet.
Currently it's 100 feet requirement, which is, as you look here, only about 2/3 of the village fits that, right? So there's a third of the village that doesn't fit that requirement right now. So I'll actually start kind of at the bottom. This is a visual of that, of these changes. It's a little hard to show on such a small screen, but we'll see what we can do. I think the thing to kind of draw your eye to is the yellow. So the yellow are the ones, the darker yellow are built lots that could be subdivided. And the lighter yellow
Under current zoning.
under, yeah, let's see. All right, so this first picture is under current zoning. The dark yellow are built lots that could be subdivided, and the light yellow are empty lots that are buildable. And so that gives you a sense of kind of what's available under current zoning, and it's not much in my opinion, but I guess we all get to make our own choices here.
So these are just open lots.
These are
You're
open-
saying they're possibly buildable, but they could be in a swamp, right?
Those all have houses.
Oh, these all have.
the dark ones have houses on them, right?
The yellow ones.
Most of them have.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I'll try and show it. Like here's a light yellow.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Okay.
Though, I mean, we know this is a swampy area, so you're not wrong in some places, right?
Right.
But we do have, obviously the camp property, you could subdivide that. It's
And you
swampy.
could also sink to the bottom of the.
Well,
earth there.
yeah. So maybe that's not a great example.
Swamps before.
Yes, large.
Yeah, but the camp house property itself, the camp house property
Yes.
itself is not.
Yeah, so you could-
Adjacent property is.
Right.
You could
But
cleave
can
off,
subdivide the camp house property.
right, and
Right,
take some of
right,
the
you could.
side yard and make another house there, right?
Right.
So
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
that's the idea that we're talking about here.
Right.
And then if we go down a notch, this is the letter C or option 3 or whatever we called it.
This is 50 feet
So-
and what, 8,000 square feet?
Yep, 50 feet and 15 foot side backs. Turns out that the lot size itself is rather, it rarely is the deciding factor. We have so many kind of deep lots in the village. So this is based off of the frontage, which is really the driving factor in most cases. And so now we start seeing, a more significant amount of the village is possible for people. Obviously, again, this still requires the owner to decide they want to subdivide and actually subdivide it and sell it off and so on and so forth. But at least zoning isn't now the deciding factor on some of these lots potentially being subdivided and having an additional new lot with a for sale house on it. And I'll switch back here. So this is option C. And now we're talking about, on the order of 30% of the built lots are subdividable, something in that range. We keep going. Now we're talking about 40-foot frontage and 10-foot setbacks. It's a little hard to show. I can try. Let me actually show side by side. So let's see if I can do that. Go. No, boy. Find this one.
He's looking really.
Yeah. So we've got, this is 40.
My color vision is trying to make sense of the different shades of yellow.
I was yeah, sorry, Keith. I was trying to make sure it
That's
was
okay.
at least stayed away from green and red.
Is it troublesome being in Florida that they're kind of alligator colored? Is not no.
All right. So I think it will now be a little smaller, unfortunately. Maybe I can get all the way to 200. But what you can see amongst these two now is the difference between, on the left-hand side is the 40-foot
Sure.
frontage and the right-hand side is 50-foot frontage. So you do start seeing, more lots that are available. Obviously, when you go to a smaller frontage, you kind of see little lots here and there sprinkled throughout the village. It doesn't seem in my mind to really concentrate in any one particular places. It's just kind of additionally, there's another spread of options in the village. And then if we go to the even smallest one, so this is now the 30-foot frontage with 5-foot setbacks. That's what that ends up looking like. It compares. So then we're talking about 40 on the left hand and 30 on the right hand side. So that there's. This one actually have a little harder time maybe telling the difference between, so. These are all in the Dropbox. I kind of would encourage people to do their own sort of looking back and forth or pondering or thinking on this, but that is the alternatives and the analysis that the CPZR performed and kind of put together to present here. And then I think for this board, we have the question of how would we like to proceed in figuring out what sorts of lot sizes we want to propose in the updated proposal. I think, as far as the committee went, there was kind of general consensus that option A and D were both kind of sides of the extreme that weren't particularly interesting to the full committee. More of the conversation came down to B and C. I think there was a strong argument on both sides. I think folks in favor of C felt more that the 15-foot side back was pretty important to them. Though I wouldn't anchor personally too much on current zoning because it isn't as if it was reflective of the village per se. It is kind of a number that's there. But understanding that people appreciate having some space between houses and that's valuable to them. On option B, there was more of a sense of allowing additional kind of flexibility in the zoning that the kind of issue and problem in front of us is having the opportunity for new building and new houses in the village that it's rather unlikely anyone's really going to want to subdivide, especially a lot of the interest that we've heard of people appreciating the kind of property that they have and not wanting to really subdivide and wanting to, if anything, kind of nudge us a little closer to a little more flexibility to try and encourage a little more development if we can, to help address the real issue in housing that we're dealing with. Like, I think if anything, for me personally, if we were kind of in a vacuum, I think option C might be more interesting, but understanding the kind of issue that we're up against with housing and affordability and the call out in the comp plan around those issues, I find myself leaning towards the option B. It is also the option effectively that's been promoted, or kind of not promoted, but in the draft of time. We've kind of heard a lot of feedback around it, both good and bad, but I think there's clear to me that it feels like a bit of a middle ground approach based on the feedback that we've gotten so far throughout this process. So I think maybe I'll pause there and then kind of open it up for.
That's not my favorite. No, my favorite is 50, if I have to compromise. If I have to compromise, I think 30 and 40 is insane.
I don't have any objection. I don't, that doesn't. I mean, the reality is that this was always going to be incremental, right? It will always be do it, see what we get, do it again, over and over and over. Until the end of time,
Right.
Right. So,
Right. And I hope people
Well, I
understand.
won't be doing it till the end of.
I mean, you
I
don't,
meant the broader.
right,
Organizational.
yeah, that's just. Oosh. Makes me feel claustrophobic looking at that.
But you want the bungalows.
I do want the bungalows.
I think
See, and that's the thing, well, that is the catch-22.
And I haven't decided what personal preference I have, if any, yet, but I think what I see is a clear difference. If A is Fall Creek and D is what we have now, and we don't want to go to Fall Creek, we don't want to stay with what we have now. Then C feels like a compromise. Compromise is not always a good word. C feels like a compromise towards the potential for greater density. Bearing in mind that it's not going to happen very quickly, if at all, because costs are so high. But it feels like a compromise towards greater density, in particular for some folks who have the concern that this 5-year process is moving too fast. Option B feels like, to Ben's point, I suggested the median home price in the village of Trumansburg would be $500,000 by 2030. I think it's going to be sooner than that after seeing this year's statistics. So option B is, we really need to do something to at least allow for the potential, knowing that a lot of people won't subdivide and build because it's so
Right.
darn expensive. At least allow for the potential. And there was a strong argument, I don't remember who said it. I don't want to put words in Keith's mouth, it might have been him, but there was a strong argument to be made in the original draft in saying that we've got to throw everything at it. ADUs, density, because we have this concern. But if that's too much to quote fast, then yeah, I think either B or C is a compromise. And which one is the more palatable one is kind of what this board has to decide.
And the problem with this, and the problem that I have with it, it just seems, it is an overall view, but like you say, my little dream of having these, maybe somebody having a big piece of property and being able to put in a pocket neighborhood where you have a small retirement community with these little bungalows that kind of create a community within itself. I'd love to open up that option. I think people freak out, and I freaked out initially too, is that they just had this vision that people were just going to dot all these little houses in their backyards.
Right.
I think the reason why people live in the village and live in this community is because they like the space. I think it is highly, highly unlikely that the people that live here are going to, subdivide their heads off and put all these little dotty houses on. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
My family has a lot of land and I know that would never happen. And there are a lot of people that voiced a lot of concern here that said they don't ever want it to happen. Their neighbors love their yards. They love their yards. They don't want that to happen. So I agree. I think the potential for that is slim, but you still within the zoning have to open it up for the potential of other types of development as we look to have our elderly parents or someone age in place and have a place for them. So.
Right, and
Yeah.
and the reality there, the question then is, where do those little cute pocket neighborhoods go? There are some empty lots in the village, and so there is some opportunity, but there's not a ton. And to get a lot to be able to put one of those on, someone probably needs to subdivide. So I think that where it kind of all comes around is, if 100 people can subdivide and 2 of them decide to actually subdivide, well, then we want to think about, maybe we want to allow 200 people to subdivide, so we might get 4 lots instead of 150 people to subdivide, and we get 2 or 3 lots. But it comes to me, part of my reasoning why I was also interested in pulling away from the ADUs was because ADUs are just going to be an apartment in someone's backyard. It's going to be a rental. It's not going to be a net new lot. It's not going to be someone that could do a little cute pocket neighborhood or, a small house next door, or whatever it might be. To be able to allow that, we need new empty lots. The only way there's a couple of them in the village. There are some, right? But most of them are going to have to come from subdividing.
I mean, I'm looking at that now and thinking there really isn't any land to accommodate anything like.
I mean, there's 2 realities.
Right.
Which some people won't want to admit, but these are facts, right? If the willingness existed to dot every yard possible with every structure possible, we wouldn't have 10% build lots subdividable. We'd be at 0. That's fact number 1. People aren't doing it.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why they don't, but people aren't doing it. Number 2, you're not going to get a pocket neighborhood at $250 to $300 a square foot.
No,
price.
no.
No
You're not.
one's going to do that.
Right.
So. Yes, I mean, we're looking at ways to make it allowable,
Right. But is it going to happen?
but is it going to happen?
Unlikely.
We can hope,
Right.
but at
Right.
least if we don't allow for it, we're saying no.
Right.
And now whether it's B or C, I think is
And like you said, Ben, and you've addressed this all along, this is our start and this is our hope. And if it doesn't work, it can always be changed. It's
Yeah.
not like, we can say hold the presses and, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And the idea of having the CPCR that I don't think Roden will ever let spin down is that we'll always have this board paying attention and a subcommittee that can start thinking about things as we notice and identify issues that, need to be taken into account or looked more deeply into.
Yeah. Well, I would like to think about this more, but I know that 30-40 feet thing that's off my radar. It really is.
Well, can I just, I've heard this before and Marcia mentioned it, the idea that people come to the village for space. I kind of have a fundamental disagreement with that. And I understand the thought behind it, right? People don't come to Trumansburg because they don't want to live in Ithaca. I get that. I don't necessarily think it's a realistic aspiration to say you come to any village for space. I think if you want space, you live in Hector. I don't think villages are famous for space. I think they're famous for density. I grew up in a village, not this one, but another one that was 13,000 people, but I was probably closer to my neighbor's house than I am in Trumansburg. Or maybe a little, closer. I think closer. So I don't think necessarily that, village life demands space. I think the perks of village life are that you're close to things and you're close to schools, you're close to shops, you're close to restaurants. And with that comes being a little closer to your neighbors if you are in more rural areas. We are a rural village, but I don't think we're rural, in the sense of what village spacing is like. So I just want to throw that out there too. I think it's really important to think about what has this whole 5-year process been about? What has it been about solving? And if the answer to that question is solving what we're after, I know it's been a lot of things, but if we're really after, one of the criticisms I feel like we've received is that, well, we're changing the zoning, but it's not really going to address the housing issues that we talk about. So in that sense, I think if that's criticism, then we almost have to be more aggressive if that's really what we're trying to solve for, or not that we can solve it as a board or as a government, but at least offer the potential to really attack that problem within the village. In anything, even the most modest compromise here is option C. That's cutting it in half. So anything we choose is going to look scary. The question is, does it look scary and solve a problem, or does it just look scary and really offer very little hope for a solution? So that's where I would lean to be a little bit more, at least option B, in my opinion. And I'm also curious, Ben, and we don't have to do this now, but I'd be curious when we look at percentages. We are a relatively small village, so I'm curious what that actual number is. So how many lots would 60% of empty lots that are buildable? How many number of lots are we really talking about there? Because I think 60% sounds like a big number, but it might only be a handful of lots. I just didn't know if there was an actual number to this.
Yeah, there is a number. I just didn't pull it out there, but let me, if my computer will. Oh, there we go. Come on, you got it. So at let's see, there's 323 lots subdividable at the 30 feet. 221, so about 100 less for 40. And then 156 for 50. So that's what, 70-ish less.
Mhm.
and I think so total lots, we're looking about 550 infill, like built lots. So that's another way of looking at it. So 10% is 55-ish. Yeah.
And then as zoning is now, how many are?
Currently zoning now, there are 57 infill lots. Yeah, about 10%, right? So about 55. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm not offering like an official vote here, but I would just, as we continue to talk through this, I just think again, you know, how can we have the greatest influence in solving some of the greatest problems that we see here? And with that, I'm going to have to switch over to audio only, so you won't see me.
What's your thought, Ben, about time, next steps, timeline? Should we discuss these two? I mean, really, I didn't hear any objections to the language change
Right.
piece. This one seems like the one
Right.
to hash out as a board. Should we discuss it at our September meeting, or what did you?
And I'm really open to any which way. I think. Do I have an actual? I think I desire to kind of keep moving forward on these things just because it's been so long, but I don't think really, adding another meeting or two to this is substantially different at this point. So I think if people want to sit with these things and kind of mull them over more and think that that is helpful for their process, I'd rather let people spend that time. If we feel like, we're pretty sure where we land, I think I would propose that we just take a vote now. So I guess maybe the question back to everybody is, do we feel like more time to kind of sit with this and think about it would be helpful, or are we pretty sure we know where we sit at this point?
I could use a meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
But then I would suggest, or I would propose that we come to the September 11th meeting prepared to decide on this. Assuming there are no objections to the language from the last part we looked at.
My only question is the impervious surfaces piece, which I'll look into more, but I'll touch base with you separately.
So I would suggest that in the September 11th meeting, this board is going to decide which of these alternatives to incorporate into the draft, along with any hanging shads from the previous piece we discussed. And we're going to schedule a public hearing process.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
I quickly would like to know, in terms of time, I want to know, thank you all for coming. This has been a strange experience for us, because generally when we bring a law for a public hearing that we've discussed for 4 years, we've passed that law. So I just want to recognize for all of your sakes, the amount of, what's the word, emotional intelligence, that's like the buzzword, right? That it has taken for Ben and the committee to bring this back to committee rather than sort of be done. So thank you for coming. Thank you for keeping the discourse respectful, but also mostly, well, I shouldn't say mostly, but also thank you to Ben for having sort of the wherewithal and the presence of mind to do that and be respectful of all of the comments, because I think I can feel myself getting tired, and my level of investment is substantially smaller. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for keeping it up and keeping it moving while still being respectful of sort of the process and people's desire to be involved. I think that cannot be said enough.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I add one thing that you might be able to pull into the conversation from the perspective of feedback we've received at the clerk's office, which is people inquiring of housing available. And then the next question, it might cost what? Like, can we sort of draw a more clear correlation between what changing lot sizes does to the affordability of housing stock? Maybe that's not possible, but we have this notion of affordable, right? And so being the numbers person, it's if you make $60,000, you're a first-time homeowner with excellent credit, and you have $20,000 to put down, you can buy a house for $211,000. So we don't have that here. So if you're a school teacher or whatever, you can't buy in the village right now. Would that change with any of these Thanks. And that you don't need to answer now, but these are the questions we hear in the community that comes in and talks, but hasn't made specific public comment in writing.
Yeah, I actually think, I'm gonna comment on that. I actually think fundamentally that question is a red herring.
Okay.
And the reason why is we are at a place where we don't know, we have 10% of the village that's buildable and people aren't building on it. So if we make more of it, more of the village buildable,
So
we would need to know who is going to avail themselves of that in order to have any guess as to the economics of it.
okay.
And I have heard the argument that because we don't know what those numbers are, we should do nothing. And that's fundamentally silly. So what we're doing is doing something that will allow for more in the hopes that people will take advantage of it. In the hopes that that will positively affect the economics of affordability for, and I don't even like the word affordability, that it will positively affect the economics and slow the extremely fast rate of increase. We're not going to stop the rate of increase, nor should we want to.
Yeah, I don't think we're.
But if the median home price pre-pandemic in the village of Trumansburg was 225, and this year it's 365, that's fast.
Right.
And it had stayed between 205 and 225 for the previous 2 decades, and now we're spiking. There's a lot of reasons why that's happening. But I think it would be irresponsible of us not to do something, even though we don't know whether it will have a large effect, a medium effect, or a small effect. And maybe all 157 or whatever it is in option C, property owners say, I'm not going to subdivide. I'm going to go to my attorney and put in a deed restriction on my property, so it can't be subdivided.
Ever. Then they can do that.
Then we will know where the will and temperament of some of our residents are.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything for old business or new business? Then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a couple of personnel items.
Huzzah. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we lost Keith. Well, good night.
It sounded like he was signing off. Oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't quite hear, but.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash.